So why a food systems perspective? A systems approach invites us to see and try to understand what is happening in our state or local food system as a result of the drivers, the inputs, and the relationships that shape it. The results of these are the outcomes and characteristics of the food and farming system of our state or of any place. As we know, currently, some of the characteristics and outcomes of our food system are beneficial, and some are problematic. The productivity, sustainability, equity, and resilience of the food system are its outcomes. Understanding the relationships and connections that make up our state's food system is important because it helps us to see where it makes sense to focus our energy for improving those outcomes. For example, where partnership building or program connections are most impactful, or where there are gaps or weaknesses that need addressing. To see these connections, we must have a diversity of knowledge and experience at the table. We all must strive to be more open, transparent, inclusive, and accessible, and we must build trust with each other and with our institutions. The New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative seeks to help advance a shift in perspective in New Jersey toward a more holistic systems perspective and the associated shift in the processes and public policy. This perspective helps us to understand the challenges faced in our communities, such as a lack of access to healthy food or the need to reduce the ecological footprint of food and farming activities, as being nearly impossible to tackle without collaboration. Functioning collaboration between community residents, businesses, and the institutions that govern and shape the food environments for all of us is critical. And we applaud those of you here today who have been modeling that healthy collaboration in your work. The New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative is very much inspired by and modeled as a statewide food policy council, though in its early stages. Food policy councils have been growing in popularity and springing up around the country for the past 20 years or so in cities and counties and states, and even at the multi-state level, as a way to approach interconnected, complex, multi-sector food and farming issues. A food policy council is an approach for us to use to start to understand New Jersey's food system better, who and what shapes it, what outcomes it's producing, and why. With the Food Democracy Collaborative, we're focused on perspectives, policies, processes, and partnerships that influence New Jersey's food system, but especially the things that influence equitable food access and resilience in our local food economies. The intent is to bring all of the actors and stakeholders together and foster common sense, multi-sector, mold-breaking, but mutually beneficial working relationships. We hope that this can help address these problems in a more holistic way for New Jersey residents, business owners, natural resources, and future generations. Since its launch in June 2020, the New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative has heard from nearly 300 food access and farming leaders about what they care about and solutions that they seek. We've established a healthcare and food access work group, a food systems research work group, a multi-state university student internship program, the first ever New Jersey food system governance map, a state food system resources directory that's pictured there on the photo on the left, a new website, which we're about to launch, that was a collaborative effort led by students, which aggregates information about all state food system or state food assistance programs into one place for the public. And later this month, we will make publicly available the New Jersey Roadmap for Food System Resilience, a report that provides policy direction and other recommendations for creating a more just and resilient food system for New Jersey. Thank you to everyone from north to south, urban and rural, across the Garden State, who shared their stories and expertise with us in order for this report to come to fruition. All this great work has been done without funding. It has been a volunteer-run effort, which is pretty remarkable. To sustain this level of effort and to continue to develop and advance a state food policy council for New Jersey, we need support and fiscal sponsorship. And New Jersey needs to launch a robust state food system planning process like the ones that will be highlighted by Lindsay Scalera in her presentation later this afternoon, 2 o'clock. This is what is next for the New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative in 2022, and we invite all of you to be part of that process. It is my pleasure now to introduce Renee Kubiatis, Anti-Poverty Program Director at New Jersey Citizen Action. Renee will lead us into the first session of the symposium, which focuses on progress made by New Jersey government this past year. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you. And great, we're a little early, so I think we could use the extra time because our panelists have a lot to share, I'm sure. So thank you, Janine, and to the entire New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative team for the great work around the food system and food justice in our state over the last year and a half, and for putting together today's event. It's my pleasure to lead off this first panel with such esteemed and accomplished leaders in our state who have a lot to share with you in a short amount of time, as I said, about policy progress since last year. Each speaker in this panel will have 8 to 10 minutes each, and there will be no Q&A for this panel. I'm going to give a quick introduction for each of our speakers, but feel free to add anything that I may miss that you would like to lift up about your backgrounds and roles. I know that Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin will be joining us in a little bit. But Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin has served in the New Jersey General Assembly representing the 19th District since 2010 and has been the Speaker since 2018. Speaker Coughlin has made it a priority and championed numerous state bills and legislative packages in the last few years addressing food insecurity in our state. Senator Bob Smith, also with us, has a long record of public service for over 40 years. Senator Smith has been a member of the New Jersey State Senate since 2001, and before that was a member of the Assembly for 8 terms representing the 17th District. He has long been a leader in our state on the environment, including a constitutional amendment for funding to preserve open space and farmland. New Jersey Agricultural Secretary Doug Fisher has served in that role under 3 New Jersey governors since 2009. In addition to his current role where he oversees programs that feed school children and distribute surplus federal foods to soup kitchens and pantries that serve our most vulnerable residents, Secretary Fisher was a grocery store owner for over 30 years. And last but not least, Department of Human Services Deputy Commissioner Alyssa Nera has served in that role since 2018, overseeing programs like SNAP and WIC that are critical to feeding our low-income families who would otherwise go hungry. Deputy Commissioner Nera has been part of an incredible team at DHS addressing increased needs during a once-in-a-century pandemic, and we're thankful to her and her colleagues. We look forward to hearing from each of you on the great work you and your colleagues have been doing to address needs in the food system and hunger across our state. And if you're available, Senator Smith, I would like to first turn it to you.
Hello.
We hear you.
Oh, you do? Wonderful.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Senator.
Thank you so much. So first, everyone should know that we do have some laws on the books in New Jersey already that are part of the food system in New Jersey. So for example, and this is very recent, we have a law that requires the Department of Agriculture to establish a public awareness campaign for food waste, and that's Public Law 2019, Chapter 93. We have a law that requires every solid waste management district develop a strategy in solid waste management to plan to reduce food waste. We also have a law that establishes a New Jersey Food Waste Task Force and make recommendations to the governor and the legislature. And that's Public Law 2019, Chapter 92. But we have a really big law and it was very contentious in the Senate when it came up, which is it was conditionally vetoed. The history is very complicated, but what it does is to require large food waste generators to separate and recycle food waste, amends the definition of Class 1 renewable energy to provide an incentive to do this, And if you're a food waste generator that generates more than 52 tons a year, this law requires that you bring it to a food waste recycling, reprocessing center, allowing that wasted food to become usually going through anaerobic digestion to produce fuel, renewable natural gas, and basically to get that food waste out of a landfill. In landfills, it becomes methane gas. Landfills are notoriously leaky, and methane has 20 times the impact on global climate change that carbon dioxide has. So it's a very good thing to get food waste out of landfills. These food waste reprocessing facilities are getting started in New Jersey. We have a model in Trenton Biogas, which is on Duck Island outside of Trenton. But there are others getting underway as well. And I think this is the start of the revolution in terms of food waste, and also a big step up in our recycling in New Jersey. Now, some of these other bills, for example, with regard to the Department of Agriculture, they are supposed to be putting together recommendations for larger institutions in order to recycle food in terms of food insecurities, not necessarily sending it to a large food waste processing center, but when, for example, if there's unused fruit in a high school cafeteria or college cafeteria, there should be, recommendations on how the institution should handle that, and hopefully get food to food insecure people. Now, so what I'm saying is there's a lot of laws out there that you can take advantage of, but I do want to tell you about the big push for next year. And the big push for next year is a bill that's currently numbered S336. And what that bill is going to do is to set up food labeling standards, date labeling standards. We tried to do this several years ago. We had the Food Council and other groups coming out opposed to it, saying, even though we were going to use their national recommendations for the food date labeling, because the other states of the United States weren't doing it, or there was, a mixed set of labeling requirements, that it would be a problem for New Jersey. And they also said that not to worry, the Congress of the United States is going to pass universal food date labeling legislation. Well, that didn't happen. And I currently don't see a Congress that's going to be able to get an awful lot done. So in this coming term, which starts January 15th of next year, food date labeling is going to go to the top of the list in my committee to get it done. And it does have tremendous impacts on food availability, the donation of food to food insecure people, and to consumers, so that they know actually what they're buying and what the label means. So that's the plan for next session. I think I've eaten up my 8 to 10 minutes, so I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Senator Smith. Next, I'll turn it over to Secretary Fisher.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Well, this is, first of all, Janine and the whole community at Stockton. I appreciate this symposium and the opportunity to spend a few minutes. Don't know sometimes where to start, because we have so many, we are in so many of these areas as the Department of Agriculture, that whether to talk about food waste or inequitable distribution, or food waste. I mean, it all obviously somewhere we have involvement. So New Jersey has 10,000 farms. We've got hundreds of major food processors. We have significant infrastructure for shipping food in and out, all of that. But some of the improvements that are greatly needed are, how do we distribute food into areas where they're underserved, where we have little or no major food retailers. Just recently, after 15 years, the Murphy administration, the legislature and the governor were able to get through the EDA a supermarket filing in Atlantic City, a major accomplishment because of this pulling together resources to be able to do that. So we're always looking to facilitate existing and emerging ways to create more opportunity for more healthy and nutritious foods to underserved areas. And starting with our Division of Food and Nutrition, which administers the school and community feeding programs in New Jersey, approximately 1.9 million people rely on various feeding and nutrition programs in the state. For us, one of the biggest areas of success has been school breakfast, where in 2011, we ranked 48th in the country, providing school breakfast to students. And with a really detailed program, we're now into the teens. And we know that we've served 100,000 or more so breakfasts each day pre-pandemic. So breakfast after the bell was the reason for that. We were able to find a way to talk about instruction in the classroom. Commissioner of Education signed it, and we were able, as I said, to do school breakfast. So we're really thrilled that we made large progress on that front. You know, I'll move on to a couple other areas where certainly during the pandemic, when every school district in the state was challenged on how they were going to be able to provide for their students, we used 100 USDA waivers during the pandemic to ensure that those who benefit from school feeding programs continue to do so, with an emphasis on additional resources directed to community food banks, which are intricately involved, as you all know. And now that the students are back in school, we've been able to better track and monitor how well the programs are working again. Recently, we accepted through the legislature, once again, the governor and the legislature, 28 million pounds of food to New Jersey's 6 EFOs. And we got $55 million in grants to assist the EFOs in their food purchases. And we're very, as I said, the division has done very, great work with that. Farm to school is something we're continually working on, making great strides in linking schools with nearby farmers as sources of food through the farm to school program. And we've greatly introduced the number of schools where students have planted school gardens. And it is truly transformational when students become involved with these school gardens, because they learn so many lessons about nutrition and all the other ancillary disciplines that you would know putting together a garden. While remote learning of the pandemic, the students weren't able to do this physically. Now that they can as they're back at school. And so we're looking for everyone to help us support from field to table working in school gardens. As I said, there are so many lessons. Many of you work within the community farmers markets. That's our division of markets. We have about 140 markets in the state, and we're constantly making collaborations with the human services and the department, the other departments, community affairs and others, to make sure that we are getting the maximum benefit of the community farmers markets coupons so that people can take advantage of them. We talk a lot about food deserts, and I'm going to just throw in an aside. I know this is very much about success. You were asking us to put forward messages about where we have had these great successes, and I know that there's many more that we can talk about. I'm going to talk to you for just a minute or so about corporate and corporate responsibility. And I say that because we know there's a lot of inequitable distribution. There are areas that are overserved and areas that are underserved. And one of the things I want to talk about is shareholder citizenship and corporate responsibility, where the ads that are going into areas where they're underserved are targeting the populations that are not getting the benefit of a food system that should be in their midst. I say that because ads are targeted with someone on rollerblades drinking a big frozen drink. We have dispensers in theaters with almost like gas pump nozzles of soda, which is unhealthy foods. We have a chicken outlet on every corner. And what I'm suggesting to you is that while we're talking about what we're going to do in the government to make sure that our policies totally integrate and cross-pollinate, we also have to talk about what what are the messages and what are the corporate campaigns that sometimes are undermining the efforts of what we're doing, teaching and producing and showing healthy opportunities for healthy foods. And so I just want to throw that in because I think it's important not only to talk about what we do on our end, on our side of the street as far as nonprofits and the government. I think that also it's important that we also talk on the corporate side as well. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Great. Thank you so much, Secretary Fisher. Next, I will turn it to DHS Deputy Commissioner Lisanera. And if you're speaking, if you could turn your camera on. I know that there was an issue in the beginning where that feature was disabled, but I think we could all be able to turn on our cameras when we're speaking now. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Renee. And Janine, I believe I have successfully turned both my camera and sound on. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
I think you just muted yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you again for inviting me and the Department of Human Services to share the steps we've taken to address food insecurity. As mentioned, I'm Lisanera, Deputy Commissioner at New Jersey Department of Human Services. And it's really a pleasure to be here joined by great New Jersey leaders who are working hard every day to make sure New Jerseyans have the food security they need to thrive in their communities. We across the Murphy administration have been laser focused on food insecurity for New Jerseyans since day one. The last 2 years have been especially challenging for many families in our state who were already struggling to make ends meet before the pandemic started. And so we've taken action to address the food security concerns exacerbated by the pandemic and to ensure New Jerseyans have access to a healthy food. We've done this while working closely with our dedicated partners in the legislature, our sister agencies, our SNAP outreach providers, those in the front lines working at food banks and food pantries, and advocacy groups. We're so grateful to our New Jersey delegation whose fight in Washington made possible the food assistance we have been able to give residents in our state. We have seen unprecedented levels of additional funding for COVID relief and specifically for SNAP and other food programs that has resulted in over $2 billion in additional food benefits to New Jerseyans. For example, since March of 2020, we've provided SNAP households with maximum benefits as part of pandemic relief. That means this month alone, over 450,000 households enrolled in SNAP received an additional $81 million in extra benefits combined. This past October, we implemented a welcome change to our SNAP benefits. As a result of efforts by the Biden administration and USDA, SNAP benefits have now increased by roughly 23% for all SNAP households. And now these increases are not tied to COVID recovery and will be permanent increases in SNAP benefits, which is a win for New Jerseyans who rely on this assistance. A huge win during last year is that we made it easier and possible for SNAP households to buy groceries online. We worked with our federal partners to make online SNAP shopping happen for the first time in New Jersey. SNAP households can now use their benefits at vendors like Amazon and ShopRite, Stop and Shop, Foodtown, and that list has continued to grow as more food retailers are recognizing the value of SNAP dollars and making this option available. And sadly, COVID isn't over yet, and we know this tool remains helpful to SNAP families. We also have worked to modernize our technology to make it easier for families to have access to and manage their SNAP benefits on the go. Individuals enrolled in SNAP can download a Connect EBT mobile app to manage their benefits on their mobile devices. This app is free, and SNAP recipients can do things like review transaction history, change their PINs, check receipt of new benefits at any time at their fingertips without having to make a call. This is another step we've taken to make SNAP benefit information more accessible to New Jersey families. And in addition to expanding and increasing access to SNAP, our administration has also focused on college food insecurity. For example, by leveraging SNAP as a resource for students, our colleagues at higher education have delivered grants to promote hunger-free campuses, and we have worked closely with them to train all New Jersey financial aid counselors on SNAP, TANF, and childcare so that they have the resources and tools they need to connect students in need to these resources. And I know my colleague Tara Colton is on, and there's often a lot of interagency collaboration, as Secretary Fisher mentioned. She and the team at the Economic Development Authority have been hard at work moving forward the Food Desert Relief Program and including us as they work on innovative and strategic solutions to increase access to nutritious foods across our state, particularly in areas of concern in our state where food access and access to healthy food is of great concern. And the legislature has been an important partner in our efforts to address hunger concerns. Governor Murphy just last month signed into law a comprehensive legislation package aimed at combating food insecurity. These pieces of legislation, many of them championed by Speaker Coughlin, who, by the way, has been at the forefront of this fight, will commit to addressing hunger by expanding access to SNAP benefits, bolstering school meal programs, and establishing an office of the food security advocate. We know that these efforts will reach more people facing hunger and can benefit from SNAP and other food resources. When Tropical Storm Ida hit back in September, we went to work to ensure that residents living in hard-hit communities had access to food, including hot meals. Following the federal disaster declaration in 12 New Jersey counties, we were able to secure additional federal approval so that New Jersey residents receiving SNAP could do things like purchase warm meals and request replacement benefits, as we know many people lost food due to flooding and power outages. We also received additional federal approval to provide special disaster benefits to residents without SNAP in more than 50 hardest hit municipalities eligible for disaster food assistance. These households who applied and were approved received a 1-month food assistance benefit on an EBT card. We have faced many challenges, but we have worked often in partnership with many of you to fight against hunger and continue to find ways to improve the food security of New Jerseyans. We are proud of the work we've accomplished and the assistance we've been able to provide during a very challenging time. And like you all, we share the same values. Food insecurity has no place in our state, and we will continue to do our part to combat hunger in New Jersey and provide more equitable access to healthy food for all. And as always, I like to make the plug. If you know someone struggling who needs food or cash assistance or healthcare coverage, njhelps.org is the place to go. And thank you again for having me and being part of today's event.
Well, we're still waiting for Speaker Coughlin, and our speakers actually didn't take their 8 to 10 minutes, so we actually do have a little bit of time, if you don't mind, for maybe a couple of questions. So first, for Secretary Fisher or anyone else on the panel who would like to respond to this, you brought up corporate responsibility, and just wanted to ask, like, what do you think are some of the levers to encourage that corporate responsibility going forward?
Well, certainly people, you know, the advertisers are there to promote products, and many of the products are just not healthy. Now, how do we change that? I mean, we are doing certainly education and having students in schools bring home nutritious offerings that they talk about to their parents and their guardians and their grandparents about how to prepare foods, things that they see in the school. That's why we push things like school gardens and participation with their fresh fruit and vegetable program, where they get introduced to that. But as far as corporate responsibility goes, what I'm suggesting to you is that some of the messages that are sent are just frankly, it's like, they call it food pornography. I mean, it's just so bad that we have to start insisting that when we have these messages that are zoomed into our neighborhoods, that the corporations have to understand that that there's a unwillingness by the community that's being served to be foisted upon with these foods that are not nutritious. And so almost, I guess what I'm saying to you is, it's almost like the marketers have to be embarrassed to be able to say, yes, we also have these other offerings of food, and we're going to be promoting that. And the only way that happens is when collaborations of numbers of people start talking about the messaging that's coming into these communities. I mean, it's a marketer's opportunity is to push a product. And I'll tell you this, give you an example. When I was a grocer for 30 years. I'll never forget some of the items that came in that was for sale, and I refused to carry them. And my most favorite item, which was probably in the 80s, was something called High C, which was just a pure sugar drink, but it was called High C bubble gum, the worst of all. I just didn't carry it. And so we have to start asking the people that are in these communities that have these outlets, how they can help us promote what we know the community needs. It can't always be, the fast food outlets of chicken on every corner in an area that's underserved that doesn't have the other outlets. And so it's all about people massing together and saying enough is enough. Right? I'd have to go way deeper, and then we don't have time for that.
No. I appreciate all of that. And I especially appreciate it as someone who grew up on welfare in Camden County, and eating those kinds of foods in my childhood and having to kind of take years to retrain myself because my brain physically craved those foods, right? My body craved those unhealthy foods for many years. And that's an issue too, long beyond, access to those foods and the marketing of those foods. So I certainly appreciate that. And somebody also mentioned in the chat, maybe TikTok could be used to highlight these corporate campaigns. And I just wanted to say quickly too, that I remember maybe 10 years ago now, there was a group of youth in New Brunswick who went around to the bodegas and did video interviews with the store owners and managers and asked them why they didn't carry more nutritious foods, in terms of produce especially, or why they charged higher prices for it and how they could work with the community to make sure it was more affordable and accessible. And that really did have a little bit of an impact on the store owners and managers. And Senator Smith, you came back on camera at the beginning of that question. I don't know if you wanted to reply.
Well, I think that Secretary Fisher's suggestions are outstanding, but I think the only thing I would add to that is that there needs to be a system of rewards for those corporate entities that are doing the right thing, who are sending correct messages, who are sending out good nutritional advertisements, messages, etc., so that because the shaming side of it is a hard part, having government shame an industry or a corporation generally doesn't end well. But if you reward those that are doing the right thing, that may help to bring that industry around to doing the right thing. And then I think, we as representatives of government and also all of the various private entities that are on this panel and call today, you need to start thinking creatively about how we get corporations to do the right thing. And of course, their answer is going to be mutually assured destruction. If you're asking me to do the right thing, how do I know my competitor is going to do the right thing? And it starts to get very, very complicated. But I think ultimately we can get a social standard where corporations should be trying to message good nutrition. Maybe we can all get there. Maybe.
Thank you. And since we have you, there was a question in the chat asking if you could speak to the vision of how the food waste legislation can help move us to a more circular economy.
Well, first of all, the statistics are just horrible for the United States of America. we waste about half the food that we put on our table. That's an EPA number. And because I chair the Senate Environment and Energy Committee, I get the dirty side of the equation. And although we have tried to do legislation to help food insecurity, but the dirty side of the equation is that food is unbelievably polluting. We've got to get it out of the waste stream or put it into a waste stream where it's properly processed, or the impacts, especially on global climate change, but other environmental attributes as well, is going to be horrible. So we're hoping that this large food waste generator legislation takes off big time. And I notice later on, you have Gary Sondemeyer as one of your speakers. He's a former deputy or assistant commissioner and a real expert on solid waste. So hopefully I can encourage him to talk about it as well. But on the net zero waste, on the concept of the full circle of food, I'm on the side to try to stop waste becoming waste and rather making it a resource. And one of the ways that we can do that, of course, is taking it out of the chain. We talked about the Department of Agriculture putting together recommendations for larger institutions on the way in which they can help either our employees or the community benefit from food that's available. Instead of it throwing out the banana or the apple or whatever it is, that there's a way to introduce that into the food system so the food's being consumed. Consuming food's great. It's the throwing away part of it that has the real negative impact. It's a terrible thing for food insecure communities, but it's also very terrible for the environment.
Thank you. Next question in the chat is for Alyssa and anyone else. What's the possibility for pushing and promoting farmers markets, farm stands, and farm distributors directly to SNAP users? This is via their app.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with their app, but I think there has been a lot of existing framework of how the USDA has partnered with, for example, the Farmers Market Coalition to really expand SNAP usage through farmers markets. I think that there are ways that we can promote, and help farmers markets understand sort of the process of how they can become SNAP and EBT retailers. And I don't know if Secretary Fisher, if you have any recommendations here, but I know that many of our farmers markets are very engaged, and we have seen that expand, over the years.
Well, we're trying to make sure that we can use the EBT. And I know that you yourselves, as well as Health for the Community Farmers Market coupons, we're actually are collaborating and having conversations right now to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to use the EBT and their cards. And that's where we're going right now. So I'm very happy and think we're making extraordinary progress. And we're going to have some other messages soon about where in the community farmers markets, they'll be able to have less than the 5-acre rule for certain areas where some local partners who want to bring fruits and vegetables into the markets but weren't a 5-acre farm will be able to do that. So we're working on that as well.
Great.
By the way, I just want to mention with harvest, there's pre-harvest and post-harvest. Pre-harvest, we have, as the senator said, 40 to 50% of the food is wasted in this country. Pre-harvest is where we have to get a better line on lining up supplies so that we don't lose product that never gets harvested. And then on the other hand, the food waste that sits in people's refrigerators, where they just either overbuy or whatever, and waste food that way. I mean, it breaks down in several different ways about how waste there is. But another area where fresh fruits and vegetables is something you've heard people talk about, ugly fruit. We have to encourage people to take advantage of those fruits and vegetables that are not absolutely without some blemish, that are still nutritionally, just as nutritionally relevant and valuable. And that will also help to prevent food waste just by, frankly, the fact that sometimes people buy with their eyes, and a lot of this food gets passed over. The speaker has been very involved with gleaning programs. And I know when he comes on, he's done a lot and has been involved himself with the gleaning program. So love to hear him talk about that as well.
Yeah, and we just got an update that Speaker Coughlin should be joining us in a few minutes, so we might have time for one or two more questions. Just something for all three of you. This was mostly focused on what's happened in the last couple of years. But my last question might be, what do you look forward to happening in the future? On your horizons for any plans you have or things you would like to do, including anything learned during the pandemic that you think should continue. So whoever, Secretary, want to start?
Well, as I mentioned, I really believe, just like we have early childhood learning, and we talk about how important it is to make sure that we have childcare at an early age being provided. I think the same thing happens with what we do in terms of the space of food, as I mentioned earlier. The earlier we can get into schools and start teaching nutrition and have students become involved, we know that it pays huge dividends. And so I hope that every school district will look to their schools and start talking about how they can utilize school gardens and farm to school programs. Because we've seen it over and over again, how much it manifests itself into creating those lifelong habits. It absolutely works. There's so many lessons. Once a student gets into a garden, I've had people tell me, from gangs to corporate presidents, the gang members to corporate presidents, that once that they never forgot that time that they had growing something, nurturing something, harvesting something, a crop. It has that transformational effect. And that's one of the areas that we're going to continue to push for.
Absolutely. I can attest to that personally. We belong to a CSA farm since my daughter was young, and she definitely eats very nutritious foods and prefers those.
Right.
Senator Smith, I don't know if you heard the question, but I'll repeat it for you. Just asking all of the panelists, what do you see happening in the future? Or what goals do you have in the future? Even though we were mostly focused on, the progress so far in this panel, including anything that was learned during the pandemic that we should continue or institute.
Well, the pandemic has indicated how fragile our social systems are. I mean, all of the issues that we had with food insecurity multiplied by a factor of 50. People really were terribly displaced, but I think state government tried its best, not totally succeeding, but tried its best to try and help that. One of the things that we're doing in the future, and I mentioned it a little earlier in my remarks, is try to deal with the issue of food date labeling. If you go to your supermarket, you'll find that there's 75 different messages. Best if sold by, best by, don't use after, etc. And what it does is it puts a very confusing overlay on any food donations from supermarkets. It also has consumers confused about what the labels actually mean. And I think that as a reform, and it's going to be a hard one because we're going to be opposed by the Food Council. I think that getting uniform labeling that is clearly informational to the customer and to the supermarket too, so that they, when food is being donated, we know it's safe for the recipient, and we know what the label actually means. I think that's going to do a lot to help in that particular area. So that's something prospectively that I see happening in this next 2-year session, and that I think could have a huge impact on food insecurity.
Great, thank you. And Deputy Commissioner Netta. I think you're still on mute.
Hi, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I'm not really sure if it was something on the chat or.
No. It was just, are there things that you're currently planning or looking to the future on to improve access, and any lessons learned from the pandemic that you'd like to see certain practices continue for better access?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, one of the things, that I mentioned was making SNAP Online happen, right? We know that during the stay-at-home orders, and particularly just generally for older adults and people with disabilities, this tool is critical. So they have another option to access their food benefits. And we are happy that that will be that this is a permanent change and will continue to be a resource for families. I have to tell you, the things that kept me up at night was, in a time where we saw so many dollars come to New Jersey, and we were delivering extra food benefits. What kept me up at night was thinking about when those ended, right? And that cliff. I was thankful that the Biden administration and the USDA made a permanent increase to SNAP benefits. Those are very welcome, so that when it will hopefully cushion a little bit when other benefits, some of the other additional dollars that we've received, when those end. I think we'll continue, and with your help and advocacy at the state and federal level, really think about how we can continue to advocate for, benefits that, meet the needs of New Jerseyans, to stretch their food budgets. And I think we, have seen in a time where we shifted so much to virtual and remote settings, the need of technology, and to really make those improvements to make it easier for people to apply online, to make it possible for people to not have to come into our Board of Social Services to deliver paper documents for their applications, and make it possible for them to do it from home. I think we continue to look at ways that we can improve our systems so that accessing these services is simpler for New Jerseyans. And we continue to work with all of you, and hear your ideas about what else we can be doing to improve access to SNAP benefits.
Yeah, I think Janine also put in the chat just now while you were speaking, if we could please make sure that local farmers can also accept SNAP Online and not be cut out. And the Food Democracy Collaborative would love to speak with you about this.
That's great. Happy to have those conversations and see how we can engage our federal partners at USDA, who play an important role in making sure that retailers have access to some of these tools.
Great. And Secretary Fisher, did you also want to jump in?
Unmute. I just wanted to say, this is not a 1-year time frame, but a 2-year time frame. I would suggest that everybody learn about some of the provisions that we hopefully can get included in the next USDA Farm Bill, which will come up in 2 years. And one of the areas that I want everyone in this group to pay attention to is something called specialty crops. Specialty crops are referred to in the Farm Bill. People don't understand that it's everything we grow but row crops. It's corn, everything but corn, soybean, the major row crops as they're referred to as, but it's fruits and vegetables. And I'm hopeful, I've been crusading for a number of years to make sure that we get more money than is currently being provided in the Farm Bill for fruits and vegetables, which is, as I said, it's Idaho potatoes, it's Jersey blueberries, it's California navels, it's everything we grow. It's not specialty crops, it's every crop. And I say that because that's the way we're going to be able to get more federal money to be able to get fruits and vegetables into the areas, as I said earlier, that are underserved. And I hope that, if as a group to, and with Senator Booker being the on the Agriculture Committee and the head of the Food and Nutrition Subcommittee, which is extraordinary, we have an opportunity to really have some impact if everyone begins to learn about specialty crops.
Great. And I think Speaker Coughlin is still delayed. I think we have one more question. Luann, if you could just please type it in the chat. We're unable to unmute folks who are participating. And then let me see, there was one more question here. We have a couple more minutes. Was somebody going to say something? Oh, okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I have a text from Speaker Coughlin's staff that he should be joining any second.
No, last text was that he wouldn't be joining us for this panel.
Oh,
It'd
okay.
be late, a little later.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, there was one other question.
Luann's question is in the chat now.
Okay, great. So can we reconsider the process for FMNP vouchers?
We might need more detail there.
Yeah, specifically, can't we expand that program to include allowing mobile markets that sell New Jersey produce to accept FMNP?
Well, we're not the department that administers the rules for that.
Yeah, that's a question for Department of Health.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have.
Yeah,
any.
yeah. Okay, I think there was one more question. Let me just get back to it.
This has been a really fabulous conversation. I just want to applaud and thank the folks on this panel for making themselves accessible to direct questions from attendees. That's really fantastic. And that's just exactly what we hope to sort of make happen or applaud in the Food Democracy Collaborative, that access and transparency to folks who make decisions that affect the entire food system for the state. So that's been really magical this past 20 minutes. So thank you very much, Secretary.
Yeah, so I think a couple people have raised in the chat too, kind of what is the timeline for the new food insecurity advocate to be appointed? I don't know, Melissa, if you can speak to that.
I am not sure I know the answer to that question, Renee. I'm not sure who may.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. And I think there was a question about adopting policies for tobacco control, or that tobacco control advocates have used, like sugar sweetened beverage taxes, maybe. Anyone wants to respond to that?
Well, I'll take a small crack at it. The word tax is a 4-letter word in New Jersey. So my guess is that that's going to be very difficult to get majority support for in both houses of the legislature. My guess. So you may need to go another route on that.
Yeah, it's generally been done on smaller levels like Philadelphia, right? Like a city. Okay. So one more thing. If Secretary Fisher could explain more about specialty crops in the next farm bill. This person's only familiar with funding from specialty crop block grants. Are there other avenues of funding?
Well, it's any avenue they decide that they want to provide. So for instance, during the pandemic, specialty crops, there was the food box program, which wasn't considered specialty crops, but they were specialty crops. And I can't remember how many billions of dollars. And it came at a very important time of need, obviously, when people couldn't find themselves with the proper outlets. We were able to have these food boxes distributed through the food banks. So, every time has its challenges in terms of what it is that we're trying to provide. But specialty crops in themselves, as was mentioned, there are what's called specialty block grants, and they're given to be able for departments of agriculture across the country to promote or educate fruits and vegetables through a number of associations. However, the number I contend, is not that big in comparison to every other subsidy or program that's put together for crops in this country. So how can they do that? Frankly, just by saying that that there can be a local preference that can be made within each state to make sure that they use crops that are grown within their state, and can, you know, can put together a program that almost underwrites some of the fresh fruits and vegetables to make sure, from a cost perspective, that the farmer is able to produce them and get them distributed, and that the institutions that want them will be provided for them, and it might not necessarily be the lowest cost. So, but the issue is something that has to be studied from all corners. But there are, as I said, the numbers should be much bigger.
Yeah, I think Janine is agreeing with you in the chat that it's tiny compared with funding for soy, corn, and dairy, and others. So thank you all again for not only being with us today and all the wonderful work that you and your colleagues are doing to address these issues in our state. And I echo Janine's, thanks of being open to taking all of these questions as well. And really appreciate your time and all of the cross collaboration that's been mentioned by a couple of you today in this administration that really, I think, makes the difference, as well as partnership with a number of people and organizations who are joining us today. So thank you for being here and sharing all of this great information.
Yes, thank you so much. And if it's at all possible for any of our panelists from this first session to hang out, even just listen in the background while you're doing other things, if that's possible for you to listen to our next presentation, who's sort of like the keynote, right? Unofficial keynote, Lindsay, of the day. I think it would be really valuable and to you. So I encourage you, if it's at all possible for you to hang on for this next presentation from Lindsay Scalera from the Center for Regional Food Systems at Michigan State University. Lindsay coordinates the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems work on Michigan's Good Food Charter. She brings experience with community organizing and policy advocacy to recent efforts to update the charter. She's collaborating with partners throughout Michigan to ensure the future of the Michigan Good Food movement is sustainable, inclusive, and democratic. Lindsay got her start in food systems as co-founder of the Giving Garden and the Michigan Young Farmer Coalition, while earning her master's degree in social foundations of education, specializing in eco-justice education from Eastern Michigan University. And Lindsay, thank you very much for being with us today. And I do believe you are able to screen share. So if I stop sharing, you should be able to. Why don't you just try that out?
Sure, thank you. That's fun. Okay, I think we can do it here. Sure. Did that work?
It sure did. Thank you.
Okay, so awesome. All right. Thank you so much for having me, Janine, and everyone in attendance today. We're really excited to share some of our lessons learned with you, share our story, give you a little bit of some background on kind of what's happening nationally with state food charters and food system plans, and just do a little snapshot of what's going on in Michigan. And hopefully we'll have a little time at the end for some questions. So let's dive in. So a little bit of background. What are statewide food system plans and charters? I think it's important to kind of define this as sort of separate from another really cool important thing that happens, which is sort of statewide food assessment. So that's like, that might lead to developing a statewide food system plan or charter. But what we're talking about are these sort of statewide participatory efforts to develop, document, and advance a set of goals and action priorities to address challenges in the food system. And I put up a couple examples on the page, but we do have, I'll be able to share this in the chat, I think, with everyone. We have a webinar and a national directory for, as far as we know, as of this summer, all the different statewide food system plans and charters in the US. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to make reference to food councils and food policy councils. Here in Michigan, it's our experience that they're an important driver of this work on the ground, along with other organizations and networks. So I think it's important to kind of make that connection. So our partners over at the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future have done some work in the past and currently to help support food councils, specifically local food councils, but also those who convene statewide councils or networks of councils. That's what we have in Michigan, is a network of local councils statewide. And this summer they did or recently they did we did a deep dive for conveners of statewide councils too. But here at the Center for Regional Food Systems, we've been doing some work convening and talking to folks like yourselves who are working on sort of statewide plans. We had a national gathering in 2019 that led to that directory, and we are now kicking off a community of practice, mainly targeted for the North Central states, but we may have some things that come out of that to share with others as well. And throughout all of these conversations and discussions, two pretty common threads have come up as far as things that people are working on that want to meaningfully engage in, which is working on racial equity and also organizing for policy action. Well, here it goes. I was gonna say I lost my map. So here we have a screenshot from our report. I just wanted to give you a sense of, how many are there out there. So about 18 states and 2 multi-state collaborations have developed charters or plans. There are about 11 in development as of now, and there are about 33 statewide councils or council networks, and some of those overlap with states that have plans. So there's something to that. I wish I knew more, but there's something to kind of how we get things done, and having statewide councils and local councils be a part of all of this. So that's some of the things that we know about the national perspective, but let's talk a little bit about Michigan. So the initial charter was published in 2010, and we actually had a statewide food policy council from 2005 to 2015. And early on in their life, they recommended creating a good food charter. That was a way to kind of build momentum around a lot of efforts that were already happening, as well as catalyze some new efforts. And the goal was always and remains to advance a food system that promotes equity, health, sustainability, and thriving economies. So that's very much remains a part of it in our current update process. So we have been using our charter to do a number of things. We use it to kind of explore ideas to advance a new food system. The charter was published with what we call 25 agenda priorities, which were all things that we could do at different levels to help advance the vision. And some of those got picked up, and I'll touch on some of the things that happened with that. But there's also plenty of room for new ideas to happen and new ways to approach things. But having this charter helps us do that, helps us identify common ground and help connect systems and collaboration across and within sectors. It also helps us organize collective action and shared measurement, and help inform policymakers of statewide and local priorities for the food system. So to talk about what we actually have in our charter will be a whole other session, so we can check in on that another time. But I wanted to give you a quick snapshot of where we're kind of at in our current update. So we have our vision. Michigan has a thriving food economy distinguished by equity, health, and sustainability. And everything you see below that kind of flows from that vision. So we have kind of expanded to talking about good food as a good food system and what are those characteristics. We have some working definitions there. And then we have 6 priority areas, which really represent results statements, things we want to see in our community. And we're working on our action strategies to say, how do we want to try to carry that out? I'm not going to talk about all of this, but I just wanted to name this collective impact model as something that helps us name kind of how we do our work. And just to touch on that, as we collaborate, we have the benefit of having a common agenda, which is the charter, continuous communication through lots of statewide networks and partnerships, and regional partnerships and regional networks. We have a shared measurement initiative, which for us right now means kind of collaboratively identifying some indicators of progress towards our results, and then looking at how can we measure that over time, and also tell the story, and a few other things. But we'll kind of I believe we'll be able to provide these slides if you want to explore some more of this on your own after. So all of that helps us get to this thing that we call our collaboration infrastructure. So this is sort of naming the importance and value of the relationships that we have, the partnerships and the networks, and how we're all interconnected. And it is a tangible thing, our collaboration infrastructure. When the pandemic hit, we personally observed many of our partners already having trust and relationships through the work that we've been doing together to turn and kind of come up with solutions at the community level, state level. It was really heartening to see that happening so quickly. But kind of who's involved. So we have statewide food and farm and health networks as well. I forgot to put that on the slide. Sort of statewide organizations and networks. We've got our funding and investment partners, and we continue to encourage the folks who provide funding or financing in different spaces to see themselves as partners in addressing these solutions or addressing these issues. And along the same lines, we have lots of folks from state agencies and other kinds of government bodies involved in this work at multiple different levels, helping to co-lead or lead things. And then also just as important are those regional and community-based organizations. That could be the food banks, that could be the universities, that could be the early childhood centers, all working on different things and often in collaboration with everybody. So, this represents, years of building trust through these interconnected networks, having this culture of collaboration, built around our common agenda and shared measurement. All right. Since we're talking about, who is involved, it's also important to kind of identify, how do we think about equity in all of these processes? Something that our partners and we have as named in this update process, especially, is that equity considerations and especially racial equity needs to be woven throughout. It's an ongoing process and something that we need to be thinking about always. Not just thinking about it, like looking at ways to put things into action. So we do think about equity in lots of different ways. We think about diversity in food systems. These are just some examples. So kind of who has ownership and operation of the supply chain, biological diversity in agriculture, all the different cultural foodways. So, cultural foodways, when we talk about culturally appropriate food, the scale of food and farm businesses that are serving our communities, looking at all kinds of diversity there. Also intentionally having action and collaboration around racial equity or overcoming racism, understanding that's a process and an end goal or vision, and then it happens at many levels. And then we talk a lot about health equity too, because health is one of those core pillars and components of our charter. So understanding health equity is about seeking to eliminate disparities of health outcomes, and that racial equity is intertwined in that, but it's not the same thing. So health equity looks at lots of different aspects of equity. And then food sovereignty, which I know that food sovereignty may be a new term for some folks. It's definitely new for some people in our state as well. And we're looking at not only how does that look on a community level, like I feel like I strongly understand that for myself, but what does that look like in operation at like policy and systems level? So how are we translating that to transform systems and policies to support community agency, people making decisions about how their food system looks, from their perspective in their places. Oh, okay, so what happened over the past 10 years? Like I mentioned, we've been cultivating that collaboration infrastructure through that ecosystem of networks. Another good example, we've been building demand for farm to institution, growing our supply chain's ability to serve institutions on multiple scales, and cultivating connections there through our Michigan Farm to Institution Network and our Cultivate Michigan campaign, which kind of also helps our 10 cents a meal program, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. We've been growing capacity for good food advocacy through our local food council network. And we've been supporting food and farm businesses to start and scale up appropriately at what they deem appropriate through lots of different networks that offer help and resources, and kind of that community of practice as well. So Group Gap Network, the Michigan Food Hub Network, the Kitchen Incubator Network that spun out of the Food Hub Network, and our Good Food Fund. So all of these kind of have their roots in the original charter. But I want to do a quick, I went too far, quick deep dive on the 10 cents a meal program, because I know lots of folks know about this. So there's the website there if you want to explore more. We just had a great report come out with lots of results. But basically, this was an idea, a priority put in the original charter. In 2013, one of our partners in Northwest Lower Michigan created a regional pilot. They fundraised for it at a regional level, and it was doing so well. And we were telling that story, and that by 2016, some legislators approached the 10 Cents Project to make it a regional pilot. And that started with just $250,000 of funding and just, I think 16 schools, school districts. Flash forward to 2020, last year, during a contentious budget situation, the program had so much value, it was so recognized as having value that not only did it go statewide, thanks to the advocacy of a lot of school districts and local food councils, local food policy councils, it was statewide and funded at $2 million from the state. And then just this year, we received updated funding to going from 2 million to 5 million. So it's a great success story, and there's still more to learn and do with that program. We're happy to share more about that. Okay, so just a couple lessons learned from all of this. These are sort of my personal reflections, but authentic, meaningful partnerships and collaboration are how we make things happen. It's the only way to do it. We can't be only in our silos trying to do things and expect that we'll make change at a systems level. And speaking of that, we benefit from so many amazing champions, people who are kind of embedded in their institutions or in their communities. And that's really important and a huge part of how we get things going and get things started. But we need to try to figure out how can we move towards larger systems change. So to get these things not only led by one person in that one space, but to be part of the system. And then a challenge moving forward for all of us always is creating like intentional spaces for voices to be heard. And I heard that's part of your goals too, when Janine did the introduction. So to have this be participatory and democratic. And that really does come down to like, how do we hold meetings? When do we hold meetings? Where are we holding them? How are we having, as one of our partners in Detroit says, multiple on-ramps for people to engage? So that's a big challenge that we're thinking about. I think I'm going to stop it there. I don't know how fast I went, but my contact information is here, and maybe I'll stop my share and see if we have any questions.
Lindsay, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I think we have, you were really spot on timing wise. So we have the full 5 minutes for questions. And the first question I'm going to pull is, and I invite others to add questions, but I see Marco Navarro's question first, is the one I'm looking at. And he's asking, I don't know if you can see it, but he's asking whether or not you do technical assistance. And so that question, of course, answer that directly, but then it also made me think about, and you didn't really mention it for time, but the Kellogg Foundation funded report, that's how I met you, is through a webinar about that report. And that's how we connected. So I think that sort of gets to Marco's question a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can explore. I'll never say no. One of the reasons we developed and applied for the SARE funding, which is SARE's a USDA program, was it was an opportunity to sort of pilot that, to sort of get a community of practice going so that other states, there are 12 SARE states. Unfortunately, New Jersey is not one of them, of course, it's North Central US. But we were recognizing and hearing from folks like the need to just get together and talk about how do we do this. When we did our 2019 gathering, there was so much sort of a feeling of like, wow, there's so much momentum. It's so nice to be with other people, because often we're kind of off in our silos, or leading, have a small team leading this sort of big statewide effort when we're not, out on our own. So I think we hope to do more connecting on that at a broader level than just the SARE states. But with one of the links I have in here is for folks to sign up for the community of practice general information list, so that when we have workshops, if we're able to open those up, we'd love for you to come in and join us when we have that ready. But also you can get in touch with me if you have real specific. Another thing is that I do hope to publish, we hope to publish our charter in 2022, next year, in the spring. And then subsequently, I hope to publish kind of a how did we do it sort of thing. How did we go about this update process? Because I think that could be helpful. And just to let you know too, I'm like absolutely taking notes on how you guys are approaching things, because I think that you've accomplished so much in 2 years, and there's some things that you're doing that I never even thought of. So it's kind of a co-learning situation, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. You're being generous, but I do see that you put the national directory link into the chat. So that's the directory that I'm referring to, where they looked at all of the states that have done participatory food charter or food system plans. And you looked at what are the characteristics and qualities of that process that work well and that are necessary. And so it's not so much a toolkit, but it is a guide of what works really well where, which of these state food system plans are considered, to have all the things that make it successful. Okay, so other questions? We have 2 more minutes for questions. I see lots, compliments, but let's get some.
Oh, yeah. So nice. Yeah. There's so much to cover. I mean, there's so many things, I don't know, you could get into with this, all the networks that we have, how do they work? I think, yeah.
Any questions from Food Democracy Collaborative facilitation team members? Not to single you out, but. Okay, so let's see.
Ooh, good
Go ahead.
question, Amy.
Barriers to start in rural southern states.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think that there is some work. I know I used to work for the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, so I do know about a little bit that's been going on in some of the southern states. I think the biggest thing for anyone getting started with this kind of thing is find your champions. I know I said we want to move from champions to embedded system change, but it really does start with like the champions. It starts with a Janine, a Sarah, people who kind of get how to work within the existing infrastructure. Southern SOG, I know Stefan may be interested. They do some policy work. I'm gonna mess up that acronym, but Georgia Organics is another group that's in the South. So there's folks who are doing some of this stuff, and you might look at starting with some of the low-hanging fruit. So in Michigan, like the 10 cents a meal program is a good example because it's so nonpartisan. I mean, school food, what our kids eat and what the kind of food they have health access to, plus our farmers, right? Like it's a win for both. And it's something that has, pretty good support across the aisle. I'll stop there because I think time's up.
Yeah, our time is up for this session. And I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone for joining. Speaker Coughlin, I'm being told, is just still 1 to 3 minutes out. So what I would like to do now, Lindsay, if you don't mind, I'm wondering, and I have to check this first. I haven't even checked to see if this person is here, but I had set aside some time impromptu for an announcement from Lisa Martin from City Green, but I don't think she's here yet. There's an announcement that I'd like her to make about GusNIP funding for New Jersey, but we'll keep that on the back burner.
I think she just said, I'm here, Lisa.
Oh, I didn't see her. Okay. Lisa, are you able to unmute? If not, I can help you do that. I might need to get you to be able to do that. Just give me 1 second. Okay. You should be able to talk, Lisa.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Janine, for the opportunity to make this announcement. So I just wanted to share some exciting news. City Green has been awarded a GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program grant from the USDA from NEFA, and we're very excited about it. So for anyone who doesn't know, City Green operates a statewide SNAP Nutrition Incentive Program. We've been operating it at farmers markets for the past decade, and now we have the opportunity through this new funding to expand to even more farmers markets and now to grocery stores as well. So we'll be able to double SNAP dollars at even more locations across the state, as well as continue to provide technical assistance to farms and farmers markets in the SNAP and WIC authorization process, and just navigating SNAP and WIC programs to make farm fresh food more accessible. And we'll also be implementing through this grant a Good Food Ambassador program, which is a peer-to-peer outreach program that will engage community members more with the Good Food Bug program and to get community feedback to inform program design as well. So yes, I will put our sites into the chat. So I'll link our website, goodfoodbucks.com, which has more program information for anyone who's interested in learning more. And thank you again, Janine, for allowing us to make this announcement.
Sure. So thank you for being here and making it. And congrats. So Sarah, who's timekeeper extraordinaire, is keeping us on point here and telling me that we need to move on to the next session. So what I think we'll do is, if the folks in this next session do not mind, and I'm about to turn it over to Emilio Panache from Urban Ag Cooperative to facilitate this session. But if it's not too much trouble, when Speaker Coughlin joins, we could squeeze in those remarks in between the speakers in this next session. I hope that's okay to everyone who's about to speak. So Emilio, I'm going to turn it over to you to get this going, and we are 2.5 minutes behind. So maybe we could just jump right into, well, anyway, go ahead, Emilio. Thank you.
Yes, no problem, Janine. I'm here, happy to be flexible. Good afternoon, everyone. My role as a facilitator for this section is going to be very limited, just kind of moving everybody along. And unfortunately, we will have very limited time for questions, but I just want to inform all the audience, please do put your questions in the chat, and we will ask each panelist to kind of come back at the end and very quickly just give us the best way that they can, that folks can follow up with you. So whether that's to get in touch with you directly, or to follow your website, or to attend an upcoming meeting or conference or something that you have going on that follows up on the topic presented today. So just have that in the back of your mind. The format of this lightning round and the philosophy here, I think, is to present very quickly some showcase initiatives and projects throughout the state, of which there are several more than this, but the kind of goal here is to very quickly go through some of the great wins that are happening, so that people can be informed and so that people can be inspired. And like we said, there are several other projects worth noting as well. But the speakers are going to kind of go from that format. What is the big win of their project? How could it scale? And what are some of the challenges they faced? And with that, I think we're going to turn it right over to Gary Sundermeyer to tell us about the Bayshore family of companies.
Actually, Emilio and Gary,
Yep.
I'm so sorry to do this, but I know Gary will understand. Speaker Coughlin is here now, so we're going to turn it over to him for a few minutes, and then we'll jump right into Gary's presentation. I know Gary and the rest of our speakers in the session can adjust a little bit to their time. So Renee, do you want to introduce the speaker?
Oh, sorry, I was trying to get my camera back on. Thank you for making the time to join us, Speaker Coughlin. We really appreciate, with your busy schedule, taking a few minutes to share all the great work that you've been doing. So as I shared earlier, Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin has served in the New Jersey General Assembly representing the 19th District since 2010 and has been the Speaker since 2018. Speaker Coughlin has made it a priority and championed numerous state bills and legislative packages in the last few years addressing food insecurity in our state, and we thank you. And I'll turn it over to you, Speaker.
Well, thank you, Renee. I can't get on. They won't let me turn on my video. Oh, there I am. How are you, everybody? Thank you very much, Renee. Thanks for that kind introduction. And Gary, I apologize for jumping ahead of you. Gary and I are friends, and that's nice to see. I see Adele is also on. So to all of you, thank you for all the work that you do, for all of your commitment to something that I think all of us recognize as being bigger and more important than so many things that we do. You know, I say all the time that the need to address food insecurity is something that goes beyond a governmental function. It is really akin to a moral obligation that we have to care for people who struggle so very, very much. And you all know the difference having healthy, nutritious food in people's lives, what difference that can make. You know, imagine if every day you have to get up and figure out how you're going to feed your family that day. It limits your ability to do whatever it is that you're capable of doing, and makes it hard for you to succeed. So we've taken that on in the legislature, and I'm proud of the 17 or so bills that I've sponsored and the numerous pieces of legislation that we have enacted, that from raise SNAP benefits to meal plan, lunch, breakfast after the programs, and all of the things that have gone along with that, including something that I didn't realize, that, we're lucky enough that when I was 15, as I began to try to understand what the challenges are that the people who are food insecure really have. It included college students, which I really didn't know. So we've taken on that challenge as well. And so many of the colleges in the state of New Jersey have responded. They have food banks on campus now regularly. They have people who are there to help get SNAP benefits. They have pantries and people who staff them. And so hopefully we're making a difference there. But our work isn't done. We're enacting another food package. It's coming up. I'll go through them just a little bit if where are they? Okay. The first is food insecurity advocate. That's something that we have gotten past, and I think this is really the next step beyond the money that we've been able to do. And we have, again, we've committed $10 million from the ARP, the American Rescue Plan, to be direct donations to food pantries. We're up to about 40 million now. Overall, we've committed 225% more than we did a few years ago. And I think that's something that we need to continue to work on. But having a food advocate, the first in the nation actually, will allow us to take advantage of the synergies throughout the state. There are people who are interested and care about food insecurity everywhere. People from faith-based groups, people from community groups, people from hospitals, people from companies. People understand, the issue resonates with people and they want to get involved. They want to make a difference. Let's make sure that we're doing it right. Let's make sure that we're doing the best that we can. A place like my friends at the community food bank in Hillside, they do tremendous work, and there are other places like that. So let's make sure that we're all pushing in the same direction. I think that position will do that. We also have come to understand, and one of the other pieces of legislation that we have most recently passed is to allow to provide for an app from direct DHS app to develop. We've directed that DHS to develop that app for SNAP recipients, because we found that even people who face food insecurity, about 70% of them have an application, have a cell phone, and are able to access those claims and make them better, which certainly moves them along. We created a SNAP and school meal dual enrollment program that should benefit about 200,000 kids. So there's lots to be done, lots of work to come. I was really proud recently when I was in Atlantic City for the League of Municipalities. At the end of that, I went to a groundbreaking where they're going to build a ShopRite in Atlantic City. It's the first supermarket in Atlantic City in 15 years. Can you imagine? 15 years since they had a supermarket there. But there are still 10% of New Jerseyans who live nowhere near a supermarket. And so we have to continue to try to advance the cause of putting supermarkets in communities that are food deserts, because we know that they provide a better caliber of food, more, better produce, better protein, the kind of things that are really essential to good health at a lesser price. Too many times folks who live in those in those areas have to rely on bodegas or convenience stores. Oftentimes the prices are much high and the quality of the food that they're getting is much lower and very limited in terms of their scope. So one of the things that we did in the 2020 Economic Recovery Act was to include a piece of that and say that's going to be dedicated to the elimination of food deserts. So we're going to continue to find ways to be helpful. We had, let's see, where's another? We had concerns looking ahead. We have 233 school districts. I just came to my attention the other day who are reportedly opting out of the national school lunch program. And I want to get to the bottom of that. I want to understand what that is about. I don't understand. It seems counterintuitive that school districts would be opting out of programs that can help students. So we're going to get to the bottom of that. And we'll continue to find ways, working with the food advocate as soon as one gets in place, working with our partners in the legislature and in the front office, as both the Senate President and the governor have been terrific partners in this fight. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do that and to continue to make challenges. Sadly, I think something will completely continue to make a dent in it. So thank you all for your caring and for making a difference in your community and in the state.
Thank you all. Thank you for all the incredible work, Speaker Coughlin. And I stressed before, with the panel too, that the collaboration in the last few years across, legislators and the governor's office and departments and really makes a difference too. And so thank you for all of this great work and for being with us.
Thank you very much, Renee. Appreciate it.
Amelia, I'll turn it.
Happy holidays,
Thanks.
All right, Renee, thank you. And turning back to our lightning round, which now became super lightning round, we're going to ask Gary to jump in and to move quickly through, please, in just a couple of minutes. And again, audience, the speakers will provide ways that you can follow up and get in touch with them to learn more. So Gary, go ahead.
Thank you, and certainly a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Janine for the opportunity. Always a pleasure to yield time to Speaker Coughlin and all the leadership that he's shown in our great state, and also to have Senator Smith and Secretary Fisher and Deputy Commissioner Neer with us today is really amazing. One of the hats I wear outside of Bayshore, where I work, is I co-chair an organization called the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance. And Senator Smith earlier had made a very accurate statement that food is polluting. And in fact, US EPA estimates that about 15% of methane gas emissions in the country come from landfills. And that's really from rotting food in landfills. New Jersey has also been the first state in the country with mandatory recycling for 35 years now. And about 25% of what's left in the garbage can after those 35 years of recycling is food. So we really haven't done very well in managing food waste. And the bill that the senator sponsored, which is commonly referred to as the New Jersey Food Waste Recycling Law, is a disposal ban, and hopefully will result in developing the type of infrastructure we need. What we did through the organics work group is a lightning stakeholder process where we brought together about 80 organizations. We held 6 stakeholder sessions over April and May of this past year. And along the way, we wrote a sustainable organic material management plan for the state. And in doing that, we came up with about 70 recommendations. And then we prioritized them to 17 what we call opportunities for action. Our scope was very broad. So we looked at 5 different chapters of the book of organics, we call them: food donation, food waste management in schools, advancing small-scale composting systems like backyard composting, community gardens, windrow composting, high technology systems, the type that will be developed through Senator Smith's bill, like anaerobic and aerobic and co-digestion technology, and finally, sustainable animal manure management. So of our 17 opportunities for action as priorities, the types of work we're looking at in the food donation space are advancing food equity to try to get the concept of food equity on an even par with what we've done in New Jersey as a cutting edge state in environmental justice. To advance sector-based education, and in particular, to implement the food waste recycling law, we need education tools for restaurants versus food processors versus caterers and supermarkets and so forth. Advocating for central governance. The speaker spoke about the Office of the Food and Security Advocate. We think that's very important. We also think that what needs to dovetail with that is a statewide food policy council like the Food Collaborative, Democracy Collaborative Janine has put together, and to have support for local and regional food policy councils as well. Also looking at issues like we found a real gap in food donation and recovery to be infrastructure of transportation and equipment, basic stuff. Refrigerated box trucks, lifts on the back of trucks. So you can go to an urban area like the Ironbound to pick up pallets of food to redistribute. Forklifts in warehouses, refrigerators and pantries to try to design programs that can try to meet these types of needs. So where we are now is the briefing phase. We've done 20 significant briefings for legislative leadership, cabinet officials, nonprofit organizations, academia, county and municipal governments. There are about 20 more that we want to do. And then we're going to stand up an education committee on Tuesday. We're working with the state DEP on rulemaking changes. And some of these are really significant to take away barriers for small scale composting systems like community gardens. So much work to do that it would take me way too much time to try to explain. Final issue of challenges. Really, I love what Lindsay, I'm going to ask Lindsay if I can borrow her term of ecosystem of networks. I think that's such a great term. That's really part of what we're trying to do, bring together, as Janine has in food donation, a network, an ecosystem of networks of all the different players from the food waste world and the food donation world, because together is how we're going to make a real difference. Continue to work with the legislature and with regulatory agents to really bring about effective change in New Jersey. And Emilio, your last question, anyone has any follow-up questions, would like our plan, anything, please contact me directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. And I'm one of the beneficiaries for sure of your composting advocacy. So appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to Adele, Hunger Free New Jersey.
Okay. Hey, everybody. So just to go through the 3 top of line that we're talking about. So I think what we consider the major win of 2021 was the creation of the Food Security Advocate. This was my comms person who calls it a food czar because it just sounds so much cooler, I think, was kind of her thinking. With the goal of coordinating anti-hunger efforts across state agencies. Again, this was something we work with the speaker very closely, and this was something that we were, all sitting around the table, and this was what we came up with, and it is the first of its kind in the nation. There have been cities who have tried this and worked on this effort to varying degrees of success. I think what we're talking about in New Jersey is a much broader net. So we want to work, again, through the legislation. It talks about working with emergency food and the food banks and people like Janine, and with the farmers markets and expanding access to the farmers markets. So it's very all-encompassing. I think it's going to be great for the state of New Jersey to have the first office of its kind. There are efforts at the national level with Congressman McGovern, who has really been a proponent of this at the federal level. His first step is to get together a national conference on hunger, which he is working with Senator Booker on. And I think that's really what they consider the first step in getting a national food czar, national food security advocate, whatever it is they're going to call it. So the next step will be to put in place a strong anti-hunger advocate, make sure that they're able to be effective in this role. I mean, I think it's going to be a challenge because we do have a lot of diverse departments running federal nutrition programs. We have Department of Human Services, which is great. And, they run SNAP and they run pandemic EBT and really stood that up in such an incredibly quick way. We have Department of Ag, which does a great job with all the child nutrition programs and the summer food service programs. And then we have Department of Health, which runs WIC. So we have to really make sure that those departments not just are talking to each other, but one of the things that I've seen and this is not just departments, I think we all know that in this line of work, we all speak in acronyms. And frequently, I will myself be speaking in acronyms, and people will say, what does that stand for? So I think it's really important that people learn each other's language, whether it's acronyms or whether it's, what does community eligibility mean for the Department of Human Services to ask that is a completely reasonable question of, from the Department of Ag. So those kinds of things, those kinds of terms, the different programs, are what I think we are hoping that position bridges. The challenge, as I just said, is to really getting government agencies to work together, seamlessly deliver programs. The real idea here is all of these programs serve the same population of people. So how do we make sure that their computers can speak to each other, that their data speaks to each other, that they work together to make sure that the safety nets are working to put together and to keep together really captures the people who might be falling through. So that's really what we're looking and what we're hoping to do. And again, we're working with the speaker on making sure all of his great next bills pass. If you want additional information, please go to hungerfreenj.org. We will be working to help pass both federal legislation and any state legislation that comes down the pike. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lauter. That's a really exciting, in the spirit of cross-agency collaboration and the spirit of governance among nonprofits and government agencies. This is obviously a really big win, and I think we're all sharing an excitement for this position. And next up, we have Tara Colton from NJEDA.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. So hi, I'm Tara Colton. I'm the Executive Vice President for Economic Security at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. I'm really grateful to be here, excited to be able to highlight how the work that we're implementing at the EDA really is, I think, putting into words and actions the fact that food security is economic security and economic security is food security. The fact that the state's economic development agency is around this table and is going to be continuing to deploy very significant resources laser focused on food security, affordability, access, and equity, I think is really a powerful embodiment of the values that Governor Murphy has lived ever since the beginning of our administration of a stronger and fairer New Jersey, really focused on equity. I want to also just acknowledge and thank Speaker Coughlin and our partners in the legislature and Senator Smith, as well as my colleagues in government, Secretary Fisher, Deputy Commissioner Niara, as well as our colleagues at the Department of Health, as well as the Lieutenant Governor of the Department of Community Affairs. All of them have been crucial in taking really what we're calling a whole of government approach to addressing food insecurity and thinking about strategies to both address some of the immediate and urgent and frankly new needs that have emerged because or in response to COVID, but also to address issues that have been structurally within our system and our communities for decades and generations, often due to just profound inequities and structural racism. And so what we're really looking to do is be bold and be forward-looking. So in terms of successes, and I alluded to this some in the chat earlier, because there were some specific questions that came up. So and Speaker Coughlin, who really was a champion of this in the Assembly and helped make this such a strong opportunity. Earlier this year, Governor Murphy signed into law a package of bills called the New Jersey Economic Recovery Act, or the ERA. And it's essentially a portfolio of about 15 different programs and tools that give our agency, the EDA, resources to support businesses and communities throughout the state. A number of those are essentially overhauls or updates to prior programs, but one of the new ones that was delivered is called the Food Desert Relief Act, which is something that gives the EDA $40 million a year, $40 million a year for 6 years, so $240 million, to combat food deserts by providing tax credits, but also by providing grants, loans, and technical assistance. One of the major tasks that we have to implement that is to develop a New Jersey specific definition of a food desert community. We issued a request for information earlier this year. Many of you responded to it, and we're very grateful for that, and your input continues to be tremendously valuable. As part of the law, we will be putting forth a draft list of up to 50 food desert communities throughout the state, and we'll be making that available for public feedback to continue our commitment to transparency. I also wanted to acknowledge something that we built during COVID that has really grown beyond our wildest expectations, and it's a funding model called Sustain and Serve that has been supported through a combination of state and federal funds. And it's a fairly simple but very impactful program. We make grants between $100,000 to $2 million to nonprofit and community-based organizations that then use the grants to do bulk purchases of meals from local restaurants and distribute those meals for free. We established this about a year ago as a $2 million pilot, and it has now grown to a $45 million program that's on track to purchase 4.5 million meals. We've already had several million purchased to date, and notably, this is now expanded to 400 restaurants in all of New Jersey's 21 counties. The last thing I wanted to mention, especially because it came up in the chat, was some of the resources that will be available through the Food Desert Relief Act. There is explicit language in the law that will be further detailed as we roll out the program about the focus on supporting food retailers, which are broadly defined to include supermarkets, but also small and mid-sized food retailers, as well as places like farmers markets, food co-ops, et cetera, to provide them with technology and equipment specifically focused on expanding SNAP utilization and the integration and certification of online SNAP, as well as the transition of WIC from paper voucher to EBT. So these are resources that the EDA will have available as we build this program out, and are really excited to connect with all of you to discuss more. I think my time is up, so I will stop there. Thank you.
Nice job, Tara. Thank you for being right punctual and on time there and on point. We appreciate certainly all of the great relief that you provided to food businesses over the past year, and some of the exciting initiatives around SNAP and WIC that are coming up. So thank you. Great. And next, we're going to keep moving quickly through this lightning round. I'll turn it over to Brian Schilling from Rutgers Cooperative Extension.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you for the invitation to be here. I will speak broadly from a New Jersey Ag Experiment Station and Rutgers Cooperative Extension perspective. And foremost, the New Jersey food system, the economic, environmental, social, wellness, human subsistence dimensions, they're central to what we are as an experiment station. It's part of our mission. So what I'll do is share with you a few points that I think will interest the group. Again, speaking broadly with an open door for any further discussion after the event. I would say one of the most significant things to report on over the last year, and actually over the last several years, is through legislative support of the experiment station as a state, as part of Rutgers University, is a significant reinvestment in our farms and field station infrastructure throughout the state. You'll see on the right here that we have infrastructure really across the state. And this is both sort of a blessing and a curse. It's obviously a vital part of what we have to do research, demonstration, and public engagement, but it's also a vast infrastructure to invest in, maintain, and coordinate. So we have 8 research farms spanning 1,200 acres. We have business incubators. We have 21 county offices. These are really vital points of research, demonstration, and public engagement. And we are very pleased and thankful to the legislature for the investment in the station, particularly to advance objectives in food, agriculture, climate, and health and wellness. Another point I'm quite proud of, and I believe I saw Director Toon in the audience here, we are actually working with Hudson County to work and expand our presence in the county in the areas of youth development and other programs. So this is one of the counties that we have had historically a limited presence in. We are delighted to be working with county leadership to build that presence to serve the residents of Hudson County. Also, I think we are at a really interesting point at Rutgers University here. One of the central messages that our president, Jonathan Holloway, consistently reports is the importance of Rutgers University in terms of community engagement, which is of course central to what we do in cooperative extension. One of the areas specifically he speaks of is health equity and wellness. And to that end, I'm really quite grateful for all of the efforts of our family and community health sciences faculty and staff, some of whom are on the call today, including Sarah, who's our timekeeper, to actually build the relationships across the university that are necessary to bring these resources out into our communities. We're actually right now looking for a chair of our community, family and community health sciences department. Very important step forward as we look to the future of health and wellness programs and food insecurity programs at the university. Senator Smith was on earlier. He has really championed a number of things in the agricultural area to help promote environmental sustainability, one of which is agrivoltaics, trying to help farmers economically provide energy to their farms while also balancing the environmental impacts of solar. So we're actually doing work right now to advise farmers of the feasibility of installing solar as a use on their farms. Let me move on to some of the challenges because we do have limited time here. I'll tell you that Rutgers right now is a large university. And one of the things that we're struggling with across the university is simply the attrition in our workforce. In particular with extension, retirements are coming very quickly. Program succession and continuity are things that I'm working on constantly. And unfortunately, these are just the realities that we face. We also face growing need and demand, and the urgency is increasing in terms of some of the support that we have historically provided and the new support that we need to develop in the area of food systems. I would say at the forefront are things like health and wellness. You see here listed some overarching priorities such as farm viability. Secretary Fisher, who is a good friend and a staunch advocate for agriculture, and I speak frequently about these issues. Our farm community is vital for the well-being of this state, but it's a challenging profession. Circumstances from climate change, as you see here, to doing things in a more environmentally and fiscally sustainable manner are vital areas of research that we're looking to develop and expand. And I know Sarah is flagging that we have limited time here. I'll just conclude with one or two other points. We've heard a lot about food waste reduction. I've worked in that area periodically throughout my career, beginning maybe about 25 years ago. I'm seeing more resolve to really tackle this issue head on for the environmental, the economic, and the social dimensions of the problem created by losing so much of our food at various stages of the food supply chain. So Sarah, I'll just conclude with one last point. Home horticulture or master gardeners is one of the larger programs within Extension that I think is a very vital opportunity to help promote food security and food self-sufficiency in communities across New Jersey. And that's an area that I'm resolved to really working closely with our leadership and Extension to build out and get more functionality, cross-functionality within some of our other units such as 4-H and Family and Community Health Sciences. So I'll end on that note and thank you for the time.
Brian, thank you so much. And we can speak from experience myself and other urban farmers here in Newark and around the state of the important role that Rutgers is playing to support our urban farms. And I'm sure the same is true of a lot of our rural farm partners as we adapt to this climate change world and tackles many of these issues that are spoken about today. So thanks again for your great work. And we're going to go now to Ashley Kerr from the New Jersey Farm Bureau.
Hi, everybody. Are you able to see me and hear me?
Yep, we have you.
Okay, great. So, sorry, my slide's a little different, but I just wanted to give everybody a quick background in New Jersey Farm Bureau if you may not be familiar with us. Oftentimes, we serve in a facilitator role for agricultural interests. We are a member-supported nonprofit organization representing over 8,000 farm families here in New Jersey. We are agriculture's voice in the State House. Our office is across the street. We follow many bills relating to agriculture and food security. We work very closely with the Department of Agriculture as well as Rutgers Cooperative Extension. When it comes to our hunger relief work, I would say a few years ago, it started with a state appropriation for Hunters Helping the Hungry. We have a huge deer problem here in New Jersey that affects a lot of our agricultural producers, and we needed a way to help them and also help soften hunting here in New Jersey for those that may not like bringing the deer population down. And a way to do that is to donate all the meat. So we partnered with Hunters Helping the Hungry. They've been around since 1997. To date, they've donated over 2 million meals. And with the state appropriation, we were able to help them expand their butcher shops, also help them by taking away the fee that hunters had to pay to donate the deer. And additionally, they got a new truck and refrigerated trailer so that outside of the regular hunting season, there's depredation season for farmers. And now the trailer travels around to different farms throughout depredation season in order to gather deer to take to the food banks. I believe so far with the new project, we've donated 40 deer, which turns out to 1,500 pounds of venison and over 9,000 meals. We've also been working to increase the redemption of WIC and the Farmers Market Nutrition Program dollars through the acceptance of alternate criteria. Secretary Fisher mentioned this earlier. This has to do with alternate criteria than the 5-acre rule in order to be able to accept in New Jersey food deserts. We're also a member of the New Jersey Farmers Markets and Growers Coalition. This was put together through City Green with a SNAP grant in order to increase SNAP participation. We serve as staff support for the New Jersey Council of Farmers and Communities, a coalition of farmer urban marketers and communities hosting downtown farmers markets in northern New Jersey counties. We also serve on the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance for the Natural and Working Lands Subcommittee, and do a lot of work with the New Jersey Agricultural Society, which runs Learning Through Gardening and Farmers Against Hunger. Secretary Fisher and Speaker Coughlin, I believe, both mentioned the gleaning programs that Farmers Against Hunger do. For those of you that aren't aware, what gleaning is taking groups of people out into the fields after the farmers are done harvesting what they need for market and getting all of that extra produce out to the food banks. Most recently, we became a member of the NRCS Urban Agriculture Subcommittee, and what NRCS is already doing, I saw in the chat that some people are having soil issues and needing soil testing done. NRCS already provides that service free of charge if you need it. And additionally, I believe they're coming out with some grants for raised beds. Regarding the question of scaling this work to a greater level, one thing that we hope to do is partner further with City Green and their Good Food Bucks or Double Bucks program, which not only helps those with the vouchers because it doubles the money that they can spend at the markets, but it also helps the farmers because you have twice as much business now. Sorry for the pause there. I went through this really fast. I apologize. I just want to say that it's been great to see so many familiar faces here today. You know, Farm Bureau's main role usually is to foster partnerships and collaboration, and to see so many familiar faces already in this space means I think we're in the right place, and we're happy to continue the work and reach out to those of you who we don't know yet.
Thank you, Ashley. And yeah, that's a really good note to end on, because that is definitely the theme of today, right? Is reuniting a lot of people and getting to know some new people and some new organizations around the state that can enhance each other's work. So it's very clear that the Farm Bureau has been in that collaborative mode. So thank you again. And lightning round is going slightly over time into the next session, but we're almost finished. And Mandy is going to wrap us up from the New Jersey Home Bakers Association.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, hello.
Hi. Yes, I'm Mandy Corson. I'm a founding board member of the New Jersey Home Bakers Association. For people who are unaware, we are a grassroots organization that began lobbying well over a decade ago to bring cottage food laws and regulations to New Jersey. And our big win this year is that we did that. In October, the Office of Administrative Law published regulations that changed the New Jersey Food Code. So that allows bakers and other home producers to sell non-TCS foods from their homes at farmers markets. There's no wholesaling or shipping or retailing allowed. This is a very intimate sort of cottage business type of thing. I have to second what Ashley said and say I'm happy to see familiar faces because I belong to the Farm Bureau as an associate member, and I'm also a master gardener with the cooperative extension. And so it's nice to see people that I've familiar with that are also working to grow the food system here. What the law will do to grow the food system here in New Jersey is it will allow us to become part of the economy. That's really, really special for a lot of people who were unable to rent a kitchen outside of the home. Commercial kitchens are very expensive. They're very hard to find. It's very inclusive. That means people who have adaptive kitchens at home will be able to work from home and produce baked goods. People who keep their homes gluten-free and allergen-free will be able to offer those products to others. They have, we have a lot of ethnic food bakers who will be able to produce traditional foods. And all of that comes back to being part of the community, which I think is a huge thing. Farmers markets are going to be a big part of this, and it's also going to benefit our agricultural producers because they'll be able to sell value-added goods from their own from their agricultural operations without having to build commercial kitchens on their farms. So that's pretty cool. As for scaling this up, it sort of slides into what our challenges are as well. One of the big things is we had to have a pivot point. For the last several years, we've been lobbying to get these regulations made on three fronts: legislative, judicial, administrative. And so we finally come through on that administrative front, which is awesome. So, but one of the things now is spreading the word while standing by our principles. And we have three main principles that we fought for all of these years, which are food safety. Of course, that's a huge thing to us. Freedom of choice for both the consumer and the producer. And also economic contribution. We want to be able to work where we live and grow our local economies. And so we're talking about going out into the community, selling at farmers markets, being able to provide people baked goods and other items for their family events, all sort of things that build a community. And then as our businesses grow, we can also then go back and support those other local businesses as well. So the scaling up is the fact that we have 565 municipalities in New Jersey, and all of them have their own ordinances, their own zoning codes, their own regulations. And one of the biggest challenges that we are seeing right now is pushback from some of those municipalities. We need to find a way to define the language that shows that these are cottage businesses and not commercial operations that will be taking place in residential zones. So one of the things we're trying to say around the language is the simile of saying that it's an art studio rather than an art gallery. This is someplace where we'll be producing these goods in our homes, but we won't be selling them in our homes. These won't be retail bakeries. They won't be restaurants or cafes. It's simply an artist producing something in their studio and then taking it elsewhere to sell it to the world. So one of the big things we're doing with that is working with the Department of Health, who published the regulations to sort of get the word out while we get the word out to our bakers about how to speak with their towns when they're talking about this. For example, we had one baker be asked to spend over $4,000 for a variance and provide the floor plans to her home. And that's just one example out of all of the towns that we're seeing. So that's been a little bit of an issue. The other challenge is something that really is just a matter of tweaking the language. We're talking about the permissible food list. It is pretty broad at this time, but there are dairy-based things like buttercream frostings and that sort of thing who tend to fall on a line. In layman's terms, non-TCS has to do with moisture content of food, while butter is a shelf-stable product. It also, we refrigerate it for shape, not for safety, but it's something that sort of crosses the line as to what type of butter you use. Other states, because we were the last state to get cottage food laws, other states are a bit ahead of us on this. And they have worked with their Department of Health, their bakers organizations and such, have worked collaboratively with their departments of health to come up with tested, trusted recipes that people can use. And so that's something that we're looking to do with our Department of Health at this time. So, that's really a tweaking sort of thing. We want people to be able to produce as many goods as possible while staying within the regulations. And so there are certain food safety aspects on that fine line between TCS and non-TCS foods that we need to work on. But for the moment, we're really happy with what's happening. We're really, really thrilled that after all these years and all this effort, we have regulations that will allow people to create these home businesses and also have a lot of consumer protections in place. So this is a regulated business. And so we're really happy with all of that. And thank you again for letting us be here today.
Mandy, thank you. It's such a positive way to end our lightning round to talk about a policy victory like that, and the next steps that you're taking to support these business owners and their navigation of all these local ordinance. So really appreciate that. Appreciate all of the panelists, and just to repeat one more time, I think if we can just go through and just take about 30 seconds, if any of the panelists want to inform everyone about the best way to follow up, get involved, or any other announcements that may pertain to, perhaps a conference or something that you may have coming up where people could get involved. I'll just open the floor to the panelists one more time.
So you're asking for like announcements or anything, or just ways they can get in touch?
Yeah, what's the best? Let's go through from the top again. Gary, what's the best way that people who are interested in what you spoke about can follow you?
Yeah, please just reach out to me. I'll put my email address in the chat. Gary Sundermeyer, BayShoreRecycling.com. That's it. And I'll be happy to get back to you, send us our plan, let you know other things we're doing. Okay, great. So we can get Gary individually, directly. Adele, what about yourself?
So again, hungerfreenj.org. You can sign up for advocacy alerts, and we are also on Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter. So yeah, we'd love to have you on board.
And Tara, I know there were questions for EDA. So what's the best way for people to have some of those answered?
Yeah, I just put a link in the chat about the Food Desert Relief Act. EDA regularly very active on social media and put a lot on our website, and you can sign up for updates there. So I would encourage people to do that. And I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Thank you. I see Brian Schilling did the same. Your Rutgers emails in the chat.
Yes, it is. And people are always welcome to visit the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station website or contact their local county extension office, which can be found online as well.
Ashley, I see the same. And Mandy, I think I saw the same from you as well.
Yes, you could email us at contact@newjerseyhomebakers.org. And that's also our Facebook, and you can find us on Facebook as well, New Jersey Home Bakers Association. That's where we post all of our updates. You can send us a message there. You will either get in touch with me or one of the other board members, and we'll be happy to answer all of your questions.
See, this is why New Jersey is so great, right? You can just give somebody a call or an email directly, and they're happy to talk to you. So, wonderful. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it back over, and the lightning round is complete. Thanks so much again.
Thank you, Emilio.
Thank you.
And so you're turning it over to Nicole Vaughn and Meredith Taylor.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Emilio. Myself and Meredith Taylor are going to be co-facilitating this session. So I'm Nicole Vaughn. I'm a faculty member at Rowan University. And Meredith?
Hi, I'm a research associate in the Department of Landscape Architecture at Rutgers University in New Brunswick.
So we're really happy to have this this last session, this roundtable, really focusing on a lot of what the other speakers talked about and began to touch on, sort of thinking about envisioning an economically inclusive and anti-racist food system for New Jersey. I know Secretary Fisher brought up health equity, and in Lindsay Scalera's presentation about Michigan's work, really centering health equity and anti-racist ideas into the work is really definitely needed. And so to that end, we have a really great slate of speakers that we will have them introduce themselves. One of our speakers, Dr. Cynthia Hall, is unable to be here today, so it'll give us a little bit more time, but we're asking each of our speakers to introduce themselves for about a minute or so, and then we'll start the panel with a series of questions, and we're really excited to welcome them all. So we'll start with Lana.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for everyone who presented and shared so much insightful information for all of us across New Jersey. It's so interesting to see how so many different parts of the puzzle come together to create change. As I said, I'm Lana Mustafa, and I am a Clifton-based homesteader. I'm also the farm director at Montclair Community Farms. Our mission is to educate and engage our community through farm food and health. We offer various programs for kids of all ages. We also have a mobile farm stand to help create equity in our food system and supply low access communities with affordable organic food that we grow at our 2 farm sites with the help of young people in Essex County. We also have chickens and bees and do all sorts of fun things to help inspire and create change within our food system and help guide youth.
Excellent. Katya?
Hi, Padyushi, everyone. Padyushi means greetings in my ancestors' language. My name is Katia Ramirez. I am the Food Justice Coordinator at CATA, the Farm Workers Support Committee. It's actually a Spanish acronym, Comité de Apoyo a los Trabajadores Agrícolas. We consider ourselves a grassroots-based organization, member-based organization with headquarter office in Southern New Jersey. We do work in 6 different counties in Southern New Jersey, as well as Chester County, Pennsylvania, and Salisbury, Maryland. Our work revolves around issues of immigration, workers' rights, and food justice. And I always say that all of them relate with each other, because if farm workers received a living wage, then they would have adequate and fresh produce for their families and themselves. We have community gardens, and the community gardens are the heart and center. I always like to say the heart and center of our food justice. And I always try to part from food justice in talking about other issues that we work on, like immigration and workers' rights. So thank you for having me here today.
Great, welcome. Tobias Fox.
Yes, hey, thanks for having me. So I'm the founder and managing director of North Science and Sustainability, Inc. I'm also the founder and lead facilitator for the Newark Community Food System. And since 2012, with little to no financial resources, we've managed to make an impact in our community by implementing various initiatives to increase awareness of environmental, ecological, and wellness issues through education programs and hands-on activities such as creating community gardens and urban farms. This also involves healthy food access, ecological or green construction, advocating for strong policy that protects the long-term sustainability of our green spaces, and the creation of a green economy. So we achieve this through collaborations and partnerships with residents, community-based organizations, and other key stakeholders, including the local businesses.
And last but not least, Josie Gonsalves.
Good afternoon, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Janine, for inviting me. I am the founder and publisher of Public Square Amplified. It is a local nonprofit news organization that places economic, racial, social, and climate justice at the center of our stories, written from the community perspective, and having community members write stories about their experiences in their specific areas. I also wear the hat of a lead on building a resiliency hub on my island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, working with rural women in agriculture, placing rural women at the center of economic and political policy, particularly in response to the growing impact of climate change on small island developing states. And so the critical objective is to build sustainable agriculture, particularly for rural women, as they are the ones with purview over not just their families, but communities. And as we know, that when women are at the center of the conversation, it certainly changes and has a larger impact on family and society. So thank you.
Thank you. So just to kick off, so I will ask the first question of the panel, and then my colleague Meredith will sort of tag team our facilitator duties here. So as you all were giving your introductions to the work that you do, you really address sort of the human rights and sort of the personal aspect of food in the food system. And do you, sort of as a first question, do you think this capitalist system does not recognize this right as this human right, or provide adequate social and safety nets for families? And so as we think about that and sort of what we know as sort of livable wage and work, how do you think we can directly address the challenges of really democratizing the food system so that people that have limited resources can really access healthy food and culturally appropriate food, particularly in New Jersey without charity structures? So Lana, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll jump in, sure. Well, ideally you'd want to begin by supporting the organizations that are on the ground, the people that are actually doing the work, talking to the neighbors, bringing this food to the people who need it most, having these conversations with their customers. For us, we have a mobile farm stand that we staff with our youth. And of course, with that comes the social engagement, bridging the generational gap between old and young, having these conversations, having them share their stories. So it definitely helps with investing in the organizations. Another way would be, of course, to invest in our youth. As we know, there's a growing gap between farmers right now. There's definitely a lack. So investing in our youth, investing in organizations that are on the ground, especially organizations that are mostly grant funded and supported by donations. I know we are. That's how we get to do the work that we get to do. And depending on how much funding we get, that's how much of an impact we can make. So definitely start there.
Great. Katya, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So at Kata, we believe that food is a basic human right and that everyone should have the right and access to healthy, organic, culturally appropriated food that comes from fair and sustainable means of production. And earlier in one of the panels earlier, Lindsay from Michigan mentioned this whole concept of food sovereignty, right? So within our food program at Kata, we abide by the food sovereignty principles because we believe that with these principles, we're attacking the root cause and not just putting a Band-Aid over and covering something as it would be with charity work, because that is not sustainable. So just as quickly, and I know this could be like a long process, but slowly we within Kata as a grassroots-based organization are addressing some of these principles that we abide by, one of them being food, a basic human right, that everyone, like I said, should have access to safe, nutritious food. The second principle being agrarian reform. And we believe that agrarian reform is necessary, which gives landless and farming people, especially ownership and control of the land. We know that farm workers are the first people that touch our food. They're the backbone of the agricultural system, and and somehow they should be having some kind of ownership and control of the land they're working, because as farm workers, they don't really have any decision-making role in terms of how we grow our food. The third being protecting natural resources. So entails sustainable care and use of natural resources, not using pesticides or chemicals that harm our earth, our land, our water, seeds, and all living things. Reorganizing food trade. Food is first and foremost a source of nutrition, and only secondary is an item of trade. So one of the things we also do have, like I mentioned, community gardens. We've started market days, and now through the pandemic, we've been able to distribute way more food that we've grown at the community garden, especially for those who were highly affected by COVID, either by reducing their income. So that's one way on how we are distributing food. And just democratic control, right? Like making sure that smallholders, farmers must have direct input into formulating agricultural policies. And farm workers, of course, because most of the times farm workers are oftentimes left out when making decisions around policymaking.
So I just want to add that we take a community approach to agriculture, and so and by doing this, we try to demonstrate the harmonious relationship between people, community, and nature, and so we participate in a community supported agriculture program, which we call a farm stable co-op. We also work with people in the community to create value-added products, so they kind of understand some ecopreneurship out of agriculture and the work that we, in the collaborative work that we do. And but first, I think we need to understand the current system that we are operating within. And so I say embedded in the fabric of our social system is racism, classism, sexism, and all these other isms. And so once we understand the social structure of the system that we're operating in, then we can say, let's go a different direction than we've already been going. So, and so that's what I'm trying to demonstrate through the work that I do, is this kind of community agriculture approach. What does that look like, feel like, when you actually have people from the community play an active role in food production, food distribution, and so forth?
Yeah, I think, Tobias, I think you hit it on the head, right? We've got to begin to, and then not just, we end up having these conversations with grassroots organizations at a level with not having capacity to really address power and deconstruct power. Food is power in America. Food is highly commercialized. We don't think about food in the way we're discussing food right now, because food is a billion, trillion dollar industry, part of creating the kind of climate crisis that we're engaged in. So when we talk about when we talk about agriculture, we're talking about big business. We're talking about pesticides. We're talking about highly engineered foods. That's what we're talking about. So for us, we've got to begin at this level. We've got to begin to discuss food within a construct of power. How are we deconstructing power? So many of the folks in these conversations in New Jersey are sort of behemoths like Rutgers. I'm part of Rutgers. And Rutgers has a huge amount of power in the state. And what Katia sort of references, right? Where are farm workers in the conversations and in the classrooms and in the policymaking rooms when we're discussing policies, recommendations, when we are designing pilot projects and looking at inputs and outcomes, when we're trying to address sort of at different levels, the kind of research that we're doing. Where are those who that we love to talk about when we're talking about transformation, but when we're talking about power, they're not in the room and they're not being addressed and they're not being given power to make changes. So I think that's the piece we have to elevate, and to be consistent on talking about food systems as power paradigms in the society. And the work being done at the grassroots level must begin to hit at that. And we must enter into those rooms and in those spaces where those reports are being written.
Thanks to the panelists for great responses, and everyone, if you have questions or want to chime in, please use the chat. Thanks, Janine, for your comments. The next question is about youth and entrepreneurship. Many of you are working with youth directly in your programs, and they are, focused on how to get young people interested in these conversations about the environment, about food, about health, and there's always a kind of entrepreneurial slant to it. So my question to you all is, how are you thinking about taking these projects and leveraging, the success that you have to sort of transition some of this work out of sort of stipends to salaries? So for those that are aging kind of out of high school and are really focused on the next steps in their career, how do we get a lot of these really great projects to the next level so that they become small, economically viable and sustainable businesses? And why don't we take the question, the order if you want, and do it reverse. So we'll start with Josie and we'll work our way back the other way this time. So Josie, jump in there if you have comments, and then we'll do Tobias, then Katya.
I spent last night with, and will spend tonight with student reporters graduating from the Rutgers journalism program. So I'm the publisher of a news organization, and which, as I said, sort of places justice at the center, and stories written from the perspective of the community. And so the young people that I spent time with last night are young people representing the sort of diverse fabric of New Jersey. An array of non-white designated student reporters who are the next cadre of reporters. And so talking to them about ways in which they can identify stories on the ground and write about those stories from their perspective. These are young people who are about to go into the job market, who are about to sort of write stories about economic, social, and climate justice. And one of the things that we discussed last night is that young people aren't on the street shutting down the street in New Jersey because of climate change. COP26 passed silently in New Jersey among young people. And so ways in which we can begin to integrate economic justice and climate justice into conversations with young people. How young people begin to think about the economic structure and the way in which they fit into the economic structure is particularly critical. And so that's a piece that at Public Square, we would like to sort of foster those stories and those ideas and amplify those ideas to have young people think critically about economics and think critically about how they show up in food systems that are deconstructing power.
Yeah, so one, we can't, community engagement is just the most challenging thing, especially for me in the work that I do. And I started out as a healthcare organizer, community organizer, and now working in the world of sustainability and agriculture. And community engagement in all those sectors have been a challenge, and it has always been. And this one-size-fits-all model doesn't work. We have to approach these things, or these issues, these concerns, these problems of engaging certain groups of people into the work that we're doing from a very multifaceted approach. And one of the things that I learned was that genetic memory is real. And so people tend to bring that memory of what they have heard from stories from generations back, seen on TV, and they bring it into this kind of agricultural arena and specific groups, not everyone. And so, because there are some people that have a cultural experience that see agriculture as part of this kind of slavery work. And so I try to introduce agriculture from a very multiple perspective. And it doesn't just include tilling soil, because there's all different forms of agriculture. There's beekeeping, there's hydroponics, aquaponics, there's marketing, there's management, there's sales. And so, and I worked in book publishing for 10 years, and whenever we wanted to launch an author's career, we had to have a meeting with all of these different departments who had a voice on how we should shape this person's career. But now I'm in agriculture, and it seems like the farmer is just responsible for the website, the marketing, the community engagement, the packaging, the harvesting, and everything. And that's just a recipe for disaster. That's not a business model that anyone would take. And so we have to, as we are working with young people and youth and shaping them into ecopreneurs, we have to introduce them to, value-added products. Well, you may not be interested in tilling the soil, but you may be interested in creating some body creams or creating some beet ketchup, or you may be interested in doing some marketing and advertising work related to the work that we're doing, agriculture, some social advertisement. And so that's how I engage youth, by looking at this kind of like multifaceted approach, not this one size fit all. This is what agriculture is. Come into this open space, get a shovel, till some soil. No, I don't take that approach.
Yeah, what I wanted to share is, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but we as well, we have a youth program. We've never worked with youth before within CATA, so this was the first year. So I see it more as a pilot program that we initiated in 2021, where we engaged, and it was through salary. And something that Lana brought up in the earlier question is that as grassroots organizations and nonprofit organizations, we don't really, it's challenging to continue a successful program with just not having the certainty that it will be fully funded to continue it. And something that we've saw within this program this year is that the youth that we engage are ages 14 to 18 or 14 to 19. And for many of them, this is their first job experience. So they're not only learning about agriculture and the food system, but they're also learning other basic soft skills, like how to deal with customers, how to deal with people, how to engage with the community, how to manage our market, how to deal with money and documenting and all that. So even within our content piece of the work of what we, the educational piece of the program that we do, they are learning everything as I don't even know how to pronounce your name, and I don't want to butcher it, Tobias, how he mentioned that they got to see the whole spectrum of what our food system looks like and the opportunities there are to engage. So seeing from like being a farm worker to being a consumer, that there is a role for everyone within that chain.
So I'll piggyback off of Tobias and Katya. So more recently, we were actually awarded a 3-year USDA grant to help stimulate the demand for organic grain through youth entrepreneurship. And over the past summer, we actually had a cohort of 9 young people come on out over to the farm. And this was also one of their first job opportunities. Many of them were also under the age of 16, so they weren't legally permitted to actually work. But of course, like so many people on this planet, we need, money to survive. So we actually created opportunities for them to gain employment through our program. And the focus of this program was really to train them in 3 different departments. So they learned about agriculture on the farm. They learned how to start their own seedlings, cultivate the land. There was definitely resistance, as Tobias mentioned. A lot of these young people never really had exposure or, you know, associated being outside with being dirty or around bugs, or, you know, he mentioned, you know, the sad history of slavery. You know, I had a young person mention that too. What I like to do to help inspire young people and help them connect is just share my personal experience. I'm a Palestinian American, and we have a very deep connection to the land back home. And I always refer to that, you know, we come from this land, we cultivated this land, like the farm. The agriculture that we know right now is not what it was. People had a strong connection and fondness to the land. So I try to help reconnect them in that way. Another thing that we do is, of course, through this program, we make value-added products. So there's a culinary aspect. So they're also learning some life skills in the kitchen, right? Like food safety, knife handling, and then the entrepreneurship bit. And as they both mentioned, you know, it sounds simple, but when you are actually trying to create and market and sell a product, there is a lot of education that goes into that. What we found was successful was leveraging businesses in the area also. So we also partnered with some local businesses, and we actually had 2 of our youth gain employment through our program. So it kind of became like a pipeline for young people. And it's actually a beautiful thing to, you know, give young people the opportunity to come out, show them that their time is valuable by paying them. We also offer a stipend, and give them the space to, you know, make mistakes, soft mistakes in the garden on a community level, and then prepare them to go out into the real world and make a difference, or, you know, create self-sustainability for themselves. So that's us.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add one piece. So, you know, internationally, the extension programs by the FAO is used to provide these sorts of sort of wraparound services to inspire young people and women, those who are sort of left out in the marketplace or the first to sort of be marginalized. And so there are great extension programs, training programs around marketing and branding, but also that these programs integrate climate smart agricultural practices. And so young people can begin to learn about not just you know, the limited space of being in New Jersey, but there are amazing agricultural programs and jobs internationally at the UN and in other places that the kind of exposure FAO offers can sort of elevate the conversation for young people and to see the relevance in agriculture, but more importantly, to understand what agriculture means, what land means, and how land is power in the world, and whether it's through agriculture or residential or commercial, land creates power. And so to begin to teach young people at a very early age the meaning of land and why ownership is important is critical.
Absolutely.
So before we jump on, there's a question that I think, you know, comes up that really follows what we're talking about. So there's a question that came up saying, have your youth programs shared any workers' rights trainings or similar frameworks with the youth that you're working with?
We have not, but I was on some calls this morning and walked away feeling very inspired. And I'll be connecting with some people so that we will definitely be able to offer them an in-depth form of education so they know what to expect and know what their rights are.
And remember, workers' rights rests in being able to claim full citizenship. It rests in how you show up in space, because we live in racialized spaces, and young people must begin to understand, what does a racialized space mean and how do you claim power in that racialized space? And so that has a lot to do with addressing how do we understand democracy and how do we understand citizenship. So key to this is not just how do I make money through agriculture, it's also how do I claim power in that space? How do I affect legislative policy? So those are all critical pieces that we have to sort of integrate into how young people understand their connection to land and connection to agriculture.
And as we begin to create a green economy, we still don't know what that looks like, what that is. But as we create this green economy, the motivation and rewards should be making the world a better place. And the money, it should be a byproduct from the work that you do, should not be the motivator of the work that you do. And so we have to be really clear about that. We got to stop, feeding this drug of, because I learned that, these neuroscientists, they did a study. They had people hooked onto a machine, and they had them playing a game, and the reward was money. And they learned that the same chemicals that get released from cocaine use are the same chemicals that get released from the thought and sight of money. And so we spend most of our day thinking about money, how to earn it, how to get more of it, how to save it, how to hoard it, and so forth. I spend a lot of my time thinking about how in the world I'm going to get people to eat more of these daggone herbs that I'm growing, and how can I get a more greener community, And so we got to be really conscious and careful about the signals that we're giving off when we talk about getting young people heavily engaged in community development.
Excellent. So I guess just to sort of wrap up, we have a 10 minutes left or so. So I'd love to have you answer this question that sort of follows up with what Tobias was saying, sort of in the area of sort of food and community development. Each of you sort of lead a project that supports a new vision for community-based food systems. So what kinds of specific additional policy supports are needed in order to strengthen your projects and expand opportunities? So I guess it's, the holiday season. So what's your wish list?
So my wish list.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my wish list is, and I'm speaking this out into the universe, and anyone who can assist. My wish list is to develop my wish list is to acquire the resources that will allow me to hire a full-time staff. I'll leave it at that.
It's a tough one, but I agree with Tobias. I think sustainability is a key component in the work that we do. We do want to see a greener world, a better world. And I think a lot of us here are doing, passion work. But what it comes down to is sustainability. So for many of us, in order for us to continue the work that we're doing, we need to be able to sustain ourselves in one way or another. So another one.
Katya.
No, times three that. I didn't mention this, but there's so many things on my wish list. First of all, I feel like the word has gotten out of what we're doing, and what we're doing specifically to one community garden, which is where Kata is the owner of the land. And it is 0.15 an acre. And last year we grew a little bit over 1,000 pounds of food. And this year, not so much, but we did do the youth program. So there's some leverage to that, I see. And for the past however many years I've been doing this, 5 or 6 years, I've been doing this by myself until like this year we were able to hire an assistant to help out with the youth program as well. And yeah, I agree, like having the resources to expand and make food accessible to other people outside of where we are currently working. And also, as Tobias said, be able to sustain the food justice program by having a dedicated, I feel like the food justice program within Kata is like one whole like big aspect of everything. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Isn't any?
I think Lana has to have a wish list. I'll go after you, Lana.
Yeah.
Oh, I did. I said
Oh, you did?
sustainability.
Yeah.
Oh, so
we all share the same wish list.
So I don't do the work that I do for passion. I do the work because it's necessary work. So everything I do and I've done forever is to arrive at economic justice, right? Because we live in a capitalist system. And at the intersection of capitalism and white supremacy, we have a construct that forces us, and this is the example of it, right? We've got grassroots organizations working 24 hours, one person, and trying to do this work. And these, they're showing up, having this conversation while other conversations are taking place about how do we make the world a better place with lots and lots of money and deciding how do we shape the world. And these grassroots organizations are not in those spaces, and they're not being given the monies to expand the mission without compromising the mission. And so my wish list is that that $1 from every sale on cannabis goes towards grassroots organizing in food systems, in building civic organizations, grassroots civic organizations, and in funding local news organizations, so that these stories and the work that's being done gets amplified by the voices of the people who are doing this work. So by the farm workers and by the young people who are engaged in this action, because we've got to expand, because we have to expand that message, right? We have to, and so it's, when Tobias sort of references how the brain works, right? So there's this great book from the 70s on captains of advertising. And so we're at a point where we live to overconsume unconsciously. And to interrupt that, we've got to do it with more civic engagement and different ways and different language, but different ways of engaging people in the conversation, and to fund grassroots organizations who are working 24 hours doing this kind of work. And food is at the center of everything that we do. So for us, for the reason I focus on rural women is that rural women live at the margins and the edges of political power. And so for me, having them at the center, making changes on economic and political policy is a beginning of rebalancing our society. So to sustain that, let's let the legislator give tax dollars to grassroots organizations because I'm sure that you're all under 10,000. Okay, let's go with under $250,000 because that's what it takes to do this work. And that farm, if you're working with farm workers and they're showing up, they don't want a stipend, but you want everyone to be salaried with benefits. So that's my wish list.
And the people said, amen, Josie. That was a fantastic way to end that question. We are just about out of time, but I want to thank our fantastic panel of speakers and my co-moderator, Dr. Nicole Vaughn from Rowan. And for the 120 of you, 119 of you that hung in there with us for the balance of the afternoon. So can all the panelists just pop your contact information into the chat like the other panels did? And that way, if folks want to follow up with you individually about your projects and the work you're working on, they can pull that off the chat. And I guess we'll throw it back to Janine, right? Janine, are you taking over now?
It goes to Sarah next. Thank you for a fantastic conversation. Helping us meet our goal of, hold on. Yep. Sarah, you're about to screen share, right? Helping us meet one of the objectives of the meeting is to bring voices into the same room who don't, normally hear each other's perspectives. So I think it was great for that reason and so many other reasons. So take it away, Sarah, close us out.
All right, well, thank you again to all of the wonderful speakers, panelists. I think this was exactly what we were talking about, that we need is more communication across sector and more cross collaboration. So one thing that came out of today's kind of conversation was this quote, right? We all know it, but today could not have been possible without the support of kind of a dedicated group of committed and thoughtful people. And so first I want to give a huge shout out to Janine because this was her brainchild. This is her kind of thought and what she kind of envisioned when it came to what needs to happen in New Jersey. And so again, thank you, Janine and the facilitation team and all of the incredible people that made today happen. So I'm gonna go back to this slide because I think it really illustrates what we need to do. We heard about food waste production. We heard about the policies that go into food. We heard about economics. We heard about energy and the energy cost. We heard about a lot of things that were really exciting. So things like universal meals, and how important those were to reduce food insecurity in the pandemic, and even, using SNAP and EBT to purchase online and home delivery options, right? And so this is all really exciting work, but I challenge us to continue this work post-pandemic, right? I think that's where we need to go. We can't just let it be. And so states like California and Maine actually, said that after the pandemic, everyone is still going to get universal meals in California schools. And so, that's something that we might need to think about in New Jersey and how to make that possible. Because what we really need is a resilient and just food system, right? And we always talk about resilience in this abstract form, but the past few huge catastrophic events have really showed us the fragility. I think Secretary Fisher mentioned the fragility of our food system, right? So we saw at Hurricane Sandy when we weren't able to get food to certain communities, right? We see during the pandemic, we see during Hurricane Ada, right? There's constantly these disruptions to the food system. And so to make sure that we are able to have a redundant food system, which is not very efficient, but it's resilient. It's what makes a food system resilient. And so we really need to make sure that, we think about how to create kind of a more resilient food system, because the next big, catastrophe, unfortunately, is coming. It's not like we don't know about it. It's going to happen. So we just need to be prepared for it. So what are we going to do? What we need to do is create a system, like a food plan or food systems plan, similar to what we heard from our previous speakers. And so in New Jersey, we currently don't have one report that really looks at a holistic kind of approach to the food system. And so the New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative took this on as kind of a voluntary effort. And so this New Jersey roadmap for food systems resilience is just that. It's a roadmap. It does not take place of a more formal kind of food system planning process, because that needs funding. And the New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative, in collaboration with Rutgers, Rowan, and Montclair University, had applied for USDA funding to do this, and unfortunately we didn't get it. And so maybe there's a place for the state to support some of this work, so that we can create a food system, a robust food system plan, something that really takes into consideration all of the voices that are in the food system. Currently, this report was based on the incredible kind of support and discussions that happened with 300 plus stakeholders across the state, who really were trying to show us what we would needed to do. And so in this plan, we talk about, what needs to happen. And of course, it's not a comprehensive list. And we did try to create action plans and even timelines for this, because, we're ambitious and we know we need to get things done here in New Jersey. But obviously this is not a comprehensive list. And so what we need is for you to give us your input. We will be emailing out the link to this report, along with the slides and the recording for this session, to everyone who participated today. And what we're hoping is that you can share your voice. Look at the report, tell us where we missed, tell us what area we really needed to focus on, what strategy should we be including. This is your opportunity to really, take on, this food system kind of issue and share your voice. We really wanted to make this kind of a collaborative and transparent approach. And so we're opening it up for public comment, and hope that you'll be able to email us with some suggestions, and places where we need to strengthen the plan. Finally, I want to give a shout out to our fellow kind of colleagues at Rutgers, Cooperative Extension, and Hunger Free New Jersey, because they will be conducting a kind of a hunger-free campus program in February, February 10th and 11th online. And so please register for that. And we'll put the registration link in the chat, and we'll also share it in the email afterwards. This was generously paid for by the Office of the Secretary of Higher Education, and the Secretary of Higher Education will be presenting at this event. So we hope that we keep the conversation going around food security and in this case, college campuses and what colleges could do to help reduce food insecurity. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone again for your time, energy, interest, and hope to hear from you all soon about the comments for the plan. Janine, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, just thank you to everyone who helped put this together, all the speakers, facilitators. I mean, I'm going to put in the chat the new website that a team of student interns helped to develop this semester for folks to check out. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to